On a rain-soaked New Orleans night, the emergency room doors slammed open. The wounded man they carried in had blood spreading across his white shirt. Then she saw his eyes. The same pale blue eyes Dr. Celia Ward had spent years trying to forget. For one suspended second, years disappeared. Then he looked at her, as if they had never met. "Should I know you, Doctor?" 5 years ago, he had been someone else, the only man she had ever loved. Now the whole city knew him as Adrian Rivera, the Mafia Boss, New Orleans whispered about. At 29, Celia was raising her little girl alone and engaged to the man her bankrupt family owed everything to. His money had saved them. Now it held them captive. And Celia had learned to survive by feeling nothing at all. Until Adrian Rivera came back to ruin her, but every step he took towards Celia Ward would pull him closer to a single secret. The one truth that could bring the most dangerous man in New Orleans to his knees. The man who had vanished from Celia Ward's life 5 years ago, no call, no goodbye, gone between one night and the next, was sitting on the gurney in front of her, bleeding, and he was looking at her like a stranger. Her hands had never shaken on the job, not once. They were shaking now. His shirt was off, and he sat turned half away from her, 2 bodyguards posted at the curtain. A dark bruise spread low across one side of his back. He turned his head and looked at her over his shoulder, those pale blue eyes finding hers without a trace of warmth. Then his gaze dropped to her hands, to the fine tremor she couldn't stop, and the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "If you can't hold your hands still, Doctor, send someone who can." She did know him. She knew him bone deep. The scent of cedar on his skin reached her beneath the antiseptic and the blood, and it pulled at something she had spent 5 years burying. She made herself breathe and reached for the doctor's voice instead of the name crowding her throat. "You shouldn't be sitting up. Lie back." She snapped on her gloves and set her fingers against his back near the bruise. He moved before her fingers settled. His hand clamped over her wrist and he turned on her. "I don't like being touched without warning." His grip held a second longer than it needed to. Then he looked at her, and there was nothing in his eyes at all. No flicker, no recognition, nothing. He let go of her wrist and looked away, at the wall, at anything but her. The air went out of her anyway. He was broader now, harder, a few days' stubble shadowing a face she remembered smooth beneath her hands. But it was him. 5 years gone, and he sat there as if none of it had touched him. Her chin came up. "You know exactly who I am." His eyes dropped to the name tag on her white coat, then lifted back to her, slow. "I have no idea who you are." His attention moved to the wound. "Now, are you going to examine me, Doctor, or just keep staring?" Celia forced her expression still and bent to the wound at his side. A bullet had torn a shallow groove through the skin below his ribs, ugly but deep enough to need a few stitches. "How did this happen?" His gaze stayed on her face. "That's not your concern." She tried again. "A gunfight?" He gave her nothing. She cleaned the gash and found it was the smaller problem. When she stepped around behind him, the bruise low on his back had gone dark and deep, wrapping toward his ribs. She pressed along the edge of it, and his whole body went rigid under her hand. "Something hit you here, hard." His mouth tipped, not quite a smile. "Occupational hazard." Her hands kept moving, but the words refused to fit the man she remembered. The Jonah she had known flinched at other people's pain. This one barely seemed to feel his own. Her fingers followed the bruising up his back and found the small mole below his left shoulder blade. They stopped there on their own. She knew that mark. She had known it at 24 in the dark, with his mouth on hers and his promises in her ear, her lips parted around nothing. The man those memories belonged to was sitting in front of her, telling her he didn't exist. Celia closed her eyes and drew in a slow breath. When she opened them, her hands had steadied. She came back around to his side. She numbed the wound, then threaded the needle. "The man I knew used to play piano." His fingers tightened against his thigh. She didn't stop. "Frenchman Street. That back room with the bad lighting. You always played the same song at the end of the night." She watched a muscle tighten along his jaw. Celia bent to her work again. "If you're not the man I know, Jonah Reed." She held his gaze. "Then who are you?" He caught her hand before it touched him and drew it away from his body. The grip wasn't rough. It didn't have to be. "Adrian Rivera." He let the name settle between them. "I head the Rivera family." Her stomach turned over. She knew the name. Everyone in New Orleans did. For months he'd been buying up the riverfront, pulling contracts from families who had run this city for decades. Powerful men had started going quiet at the sound of it, but she knew the man behind that name. Jonah Reed, the one who had left her 5 years ago without a word. She pulled her hand free and nodded at his side. "There's a bullet wound here. If you won't let me treat it, why come to a hospital at all?" He studied her a moment, then looked away as if she had already been dealt with. "We're done here. Find me someone else." Her hands stayed where they were. "I'm the only attending in the ER tonight." His tone didn't move. "Then call someone in." Her jaw set. "This is an emergency room, not one of your businesses." His eyes came back to hers and stayed there. "I decide who touches me." The curtain slid back behind her. A man in a dark suit stepped into the bay, unhurried, and when his jacket shifted, she caught the bulge of the gun at his hip. He took in Adrian, then her, reading the room in a single pass. His voice stayed level. "Everything all right?" Adrian didn't look away from Celia. "Everything's fine, Marcel. I was just telling the doctor I'd rather not have her hands on me." Marcel's attention settled on her, calm and patient, in a way that made arguing feel pointless. "Do as he asks, please." Adrian. The name landed on her a second time, and from this man it sounded like a fact, like something everyone already knew. She stood there trying to fit it over the face in front of her, and couldn't. How a dock worker who played piano on Frenchman Street had become Adrian Rivera, she had no idea. But the man he'd called Marcel had said the name without hesitation, and the one on the gurney had answered to it. Celia turned back to Adrian, and the cold in his face went straight through her. She looked away before he could see her eyes fill. Her hands were shaking as she stripped off her gloves and dropped them on the tray. She forced out a small laugh. "Fine, have it your way, Adrian Rivera." She had her hand on the curtain when she stopped and looked back at him over her shoulder. "One last question." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who was Jonah Reed?" The corner of his mouth lifted, small and bitter. "There was no such man." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the curtain. His voice roughened. "There never was." Celia made it around the corner before she let herself break. Her back found the wall. She pressed a hand over her heart and felt it slamming there, too fast and too hard, as if it had known him before the rest of her could catch up. 5 years without a single call, and now this. The words broke out of her, low and uneven. "How could you do this to me, Jonah Reed? You leave, you disappear, and then you walk back in and look at me like a stranger." Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A message from her mother. Elise's fever had broken. She was sleeping, and there was nothing to worry about. Her 4-year-old daughter, Elise, was all right. For the first time in hours, the tension left Celia's shoulders. She caught the one tear before it could fall and pressed it away with the back of her hand. Then she pushed off the wall. She would not come apart in the middle of a hospital over a man who had looked straight through her. At the tall windows at the end of the corridor, she stopped. Below her, 2 men in dark suits crossed the hospital entrance with the one who called himself Adrian Rivera between them. A black car sat at the curb. One of them opened the rear door, and Adrian paused before he got in, his hand drifting to the dressing under his shirt. For one foolish second, she waited for him to look up at the window. He didn't. The car pulled out and was gone into the dark. She stayed at the glass, watching the empty place where it had been. The man down there moved like the city belonged to him. Nothing like the boy who used to walk her home with his hands in his pockets. What had happened to him in all that time? What could have turned him into this? She typed his name into her phone before she could talk herself out of it. The Rivera Group came up everywhere. Shipping terminals, private security, whole blocks of riverfront changing hands, money moving in plain sight. But the man himself was a blank space. No photograph she could swear was his face, no interview, no account, no history, nothing a person leaves behind without meaning to. And that was the part that frightened her. A man didn't erase himself that cleanly unless he had reasons, and not one of the reasons she could think of was a safe one. Jonah Reed had vanished 5 years ago. Adrian Rivera had stepped into the empty space and pulled it shut behind him. She went back to her home screen, and the photo there caught her. Elise, grinning up at the camera, dark curls falling around her cheeks. Celia looked at those pale blue eyes for a long moment, then wiped her own dry. By the time her shift ended, the dark had begun to thin toward morning. The driver her fiancé, Davis Keene, had sent was already parked out front. The moment she climbed in, he texted Davis to say she was on her way. Celia watched the message vanish from his screen and held her tongue. She barely spoke the whole way. When the car came through the gates of the estate, she looked toward the house first. His car wasn't in the drive, and the breath she'd been holding eased out of her. The place was always easier to walk into when he wasn't in it. 2 years engaged, and she had pushed the wedding back more than once. After her father died and the truth about the Ward finances surfaced, Davis had taken all of them in: Celia, her mother, her younger brother Cedric, and Elise. From the street, it looked like a rescue, a fallen family lifted out of ruin, a little girl given a wealthy, steady home. Inside the house, the kindness sat differently. She went up without waking anyone and slipped into Elise's room. Her daughter lay under a thin blanket, one cheek pressed into the pillow. Celia laid the backs of her fingers to the small forehead, cooler now. She bent and kissed the warm spot, and beneath her lips, Elise stirred. "Mama." The word came thick with sleep, and a small hand closed around Celia's sleeve. She caught the little fingers and held them. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Elise's eyes drifted half open, glassy and far away. "Did you fix everybody?" Celia's throat closed. "Most of them." "You always fix them." The little girl was already sliding back under, her grip going loose. Celia stayed bent over her until the small hand fell slack and her breathing turned deep and even. A sound at the door turned her around. Her mother stood there in a robe, one hand on the frame. "How was your shift, sweetheart?" Margie's voice was soft with sleep. Celia made her mouth move into the shape of a smile. "Fine, Mum. Quiet night." The lie came out smooth enough to scare her. Her mother only nodded, too worn down to catch what her daughter was holding back. "Get some sleep." Celia watched her go down the hall. Margie Ward had run her own house once, with staff who waited on her word and a table of important people who waited on her approval before they sat. Now she moved through her future son-in-law's home on quiet feet, minding a child, careful never to act as though she belonged there. 2 doors down, Cedric lived the same way. They weren't guests in this house. They weren't quite anything. Celia turned back to the bed. Elisa hadn't moved. She drew the blanket up over her shoulder and brushed a curl off her face. Her hand wasn't steady. "Baby," she whispered, and the word cracked. She let it. "Your father came back tonight." Her fingers stayed in the soft hair. She looked down at the closed eyes, the same pale blue hidden under those lashes, and a tear slipped loose and fell to the pillow. "And he has no idea you exist. He has no idea." Celia had slept less than 3 hours when she gave up on it. She took her coffee out to the covered terrace where the lawn ran down past the pool to a private dock and the grey water of Lake Pontchartrain beyond. Davis Keene's house rose behind her, all pale stone and tall columns, the kind of place that photographed like a dream and held her like a cage. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Every time she'd closed her eyes that night, the same 2 lines had been waiting for her in the dark. "There was no such man. There never was." "You're up early." Celia looked over her shoulder. Her mother crossed the terrace in a silk robe, hair already brushed into place. Even now, after everything, Margie Ward would not come downstairs undone. "You barely slept." Margie settled into the chair across from her and looked her over. "These night shifts are bad for your health, your skin too." She glanced toward the house. "Is Davis home?" Celia shook her head. I haven't seen him. Margie's mouth tightened. Then go up before he's back. You don't want him seeing you worn out like this. Her eyes moved over Celia's face, slower now. Something's wrong with you this morning. I'm tired. Margie leaned in. No, it's more than that. What happened? Celia drank her coffee and kept her eyes on the lake, where the morning light was breaking the reflection of the house into pieces. She waited for her mother to let it go. Margie let out a breath instead. Davis spoke to me yesterday. He wants this wedding settled next month, and I think he's right. You've put it off long enough, Celia. We've lived here a year. A short, bitter sound came out of her. Mum, you know I don't love him. The look her mother gave her was tired more than sad. The look of a woman watching a child fight something she should have accepted long ago. Do we have a choice? Margie's hands folded on the table. Your father died and left us nothing. The house was gone. The company was buried in debt. And then there was Cedric. Celia's chin lifted. My brother's gambling debts aren't mine to carry. Margie didn't blink. No, but they land on all of us anyway. Davis paid them. He cleared the liens after your father died. He kept the creditors off us, and he put a roof over all our heads. Celia came right back at her. He made us need him. Margie's tone didn't change. He kept us off the street. Celia's gaze moved over the floorless lawn, the dock, the columns at her back, every inch of it his. And now he owns every part of us. Margie's mouth thinned. Try to see the good in him. Your father always wanted you to marry Davis. She turned her cup in her hands, though it was empty. Love doesn't last, Celia. It burns off in a breath, and then the world goes on and never asks what your heart wanted. What's left are the practical things, a home, a man who stays. Celia shook her head slowly. Margie's voice gentled, but the words didn't. He loves you. He took in a child that wasn't even his and calls her his own. Do you know how few men would do that? Celia's grip tightened on the cup. Davis loves what he can control, us needing him. That's what he likes. She set the cup down harder than she meant to. He paid Cedric's debts. He handled the seizures after Dad died. He keeps his driver outside my hospital, and now he holds every string we've got. Her voice shook, and she let it. And my daughter doesn't need a father brought along with the rest of us. She has me. Margie pressed on. A girl needs a father, Celia. Celia's voice went quiet. Elise already has a father. For a second, Margie only looked at her. Then she laughed, soft and disbelieving. Dear God, you don't mean that dock worker. The water blurred at the edge of Celia's sight. Margie waved a hand. The one who left you and vanished 5 years ago. What was his name? John? Jonas? Celia swallowed. Jonah Reed. Margie waved it off. Whatever it was. He's probably dead in a ditch somewhere by now. She shook her head. Look what loving the wrong kind of man cost you. Celia stood. Below the terrace, the pool lay smooth and perfect, the hedges clipped to the inch, the whole beautiful machine of Davis Keene's money humming around them. He was a good man. He worked the port and he played piano, and none of that made him worth less than us. He just didn't meet your price. She turned on her mother. And look at us now. We live in another man's house because Dad hid the truth about the company until the day he died, and Cedric gambled away whatever was left. We're paying for their mistakes, Mom, not mine. Her hand came up toward the columns, the water, all of it. Being born a ward must be some kind of curse. She crossed the terrace before her mother could answer. The glass doors opened onto the wide marble foyer, cool after the warm morning air. She'd barely stepped inside when Davis Keene came down the sweeping staircase, dark trousers, white shirt, phone to his ear. He caught sight of Celia and mouthed a good morning, then went on down, without breaking off his call. Of course, Mr. Rivera. Celia stopped where she stood. Davis crossed the foyer past her, easy, taking his time, with no idea what the name had done to her. We'll go over the riverfront contracts at the meeting this afternoon. His voice stayed smooth, pleased with itself. I look forward to meeting you in person at last. The air went out of Celia. She reached for the wall to hold herself up, and the cup slipped from her other hand and shattered across the marble. Davis had never once laid eyes on Jonah Reed, and in a few hours he would be sitting across a table from Adrian Rivera. Celia was crouched over the broken cup, picking the pieces off the floor, when Davis ended his call behind her. His shoes came across the tile. He lowered himself beside her and reached for a shard near her knee. "You okay? You seem on edge this morning." Celia didn't look up. "I've got it, Davis." His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and heavy, and the other came up to brush her cheek. "Let me call the hospital and get you a few days off. We'll go somewhere, just the two of us." Celia turned her face from his fingers and looked at the hand on her shoulder until he took it back. A slow smile touched his mouth. "We're getting married soon, and you still won't let me near you." He rose and reached down to help her up. "I'm a patient man, though. I've waited years for you. I can wait one more month." She got to her feet on her own. "You keep telling everyone the wedding is a month away. Funny, I'm the last to hear about it. Isn't it time?" He spread his palms. "A happy family of 3. A short, sharp laugh broke out of her. "Why are you so set on marrying a woman who doesn't love you? You deserve someone who does, Davis. Why won't you just let me go?" His face cooled, the easy charm gone. "Are we doing this again? I thought we were past it." Celia brought her hand down hard on the counter. "We're past it?" "You hold my brother over my head. One word from you and Cedric's protection disappears, and those men he owes come collecting. That isn't past, Davis, that's a leash." Her voice climbed and she let it. "Have some pride. Let me go." Davis smiled. "Go where?" He tipped his head, almost gentle. "You think your hospital salary will support your mother, your brother, and a child? You think your mother will live in a one-bedroom apartment across town? Cedric's never worked a day in his life. What's he going to do? And what kind of life do you think you can give Elise on your own?" His hand closed around her wrist, hard. "I have always been good to you, Celia Ward. To your family. Stop being so ungrateful." He held on, his thumb pressed to the thin skin over her pulse. "On the 15th, 1 month from now, we'll have the wedding this city talks about for years. You'll be the most beautiful bride New Orleans has ever seen, my bride." His eyes moved over her. "Elise will be our flower girl, our daughter." Celia swallowed against the grip. "Let go of me, Davis." He let go. The coldness drained out of his face, and his voice came back even and pleasant. 7 o'clock. I'm taking you to dinner." His gaze traveled over her. "Wear something beautiful. Put on the earrings I bought you." The corner of his mouth lifted. "You know how much I love watching you shine on my arm." He picked an apple off the counter and bit into it. "I'm close to closing a very profitable deal with this Rivera today." He spoke around the bite, easy and sure of himself. "The man came out of nowhere and started snapping up port contracts and prime land all over the city. Better to have him beside me than across from me, so if I lock in the partnership this afternoon, sweetheart, I'll be in a very good mood tonight." Celia was listening with her jaw set so tight it ached. The housekeeper came in then, Elise on her hip, still flushed and soft with sleep. "Miss Ward, the princess is awake." The woman passed the little girl over, and Elise's arms went straight around Celia's neck. Celia held her close and felt the morning ease a fraction. "Good morning, baby." Davis stepped in beside them. "Good morning, my beautiful girl. Why don't you wish your daddy luck?" Celia shifted Elise onto her other hip, away from him. "Come on, Elise. Let's go make pancakes." She carried her daughter toward the kitchen, then bent her head close. "First, we say good morning to your grandmother. What do you think?" Behind her, Davis stopped, smiling. Davis had barely spoken since they sat down. He hadn't touched his drink, and he'd waved off the waiter's first question with a short shake of his head. The City Club dining room glittered around them the way it always did. Heavy crystal overhead, dark wood panels, prominent guests murmuring over dinner in the candlelight, the lights of the riverfront beyond the tall windows. None of it softened the tension working in Davis's face. Celia set her water glass down and made herself ask, "The meeting didn't go well, I take it?" A short laugh came out of him. "You know me too well, Celia." He turned the glass slowly in his hand. "You're right. I didn't get what I wanted, but you know I don't give up." Her fingers traced the stem of her glass. "What's he like, this Mr. Rivera?" Davis took a slow sip of wine. "Arrogant. He thinks he doesn't need the partnership." Celia looked away. Davis smoothed the napkin over his knee. "The city's opening the old river terminal for redevelopment. Warehouses, commercial land, port access. I've got the local connections and the permits. He's got the ships, the security firms, the capital." Celia frowned. "So why did he turn you down?" The line of Davis's jaw tightened. "Because he told me he can open those doors himself." He reached for his wine again, and that what I called a partnership was really just me asking him for a favor. He tried to say it lightly. The sting of it stayed in his voice anyway. A stir moved through the front of the room. The waiters straightened first. Then the mayor rose from his table, and when the two businessmen beside him stood as well, Davis's gaze cut to the door. Celia turned to follow it, and her pulse stumbled. Adrian Rivera was walking in. Nothing was left of the man from the hospital. He moved through the room in a black suit, spine straight, the mayor's advisor on one side, and two men whose names everyone in the city knew on the other. As he passed, waiters stepped aside, and two of them hurried ahead to ready his table. For a moment, Celia was somewhere else, the little jazz bar where Jonah used to play, where she'd sat in the dark and listened, unable to take her eyes off him. The dim corner table that had always been theirs, the way they used to talk for hours after his set ended. His small apartment, his hands moving over her like she was something worth slowing down for. The warmth of his mouth, the nights he'd made her feel more seen than anyone ever had. When she looked at Adrian Rivera again, the man she saw was a stranger, aware of his own power, surrounded by men who shifted to make room for him. Her heart gave one hard knock against her ribs. Then his eyes found hers across the room. She looked away fast, but Davis was already speaking. "Speak of the devil." He set his glass down. "There's Rivera, and he's coming this way. Be political. Smile at him." Celia shifted in her cream silk dress, every part of her willing him not to come over. But a trace of his cologne reached her before she looked up, darker and more expensive than she remembered and still unmistakably his. Then he was standing at the head of their table. She kept her eyes on her glass. Adrian reached the table, his voice calm, almost bored. "Good evening, Mr. Keene." Davis pushed his chair back and stood, his hand out. "Mr. Rivera, what a coincidence. I've never seen you here before." Celia didn't look up, but she could feel the small curve at the edge of his mouth. Instead, she watched his hand close around Davis's, the expensive watch at his wrist. Adrian let the handshake go. "Get used to seeing me. The City Club is a pleasant place to hold private meetings." Davis turned on his easy, false smile. "Let me introduce my fiancée, Celia Ward. She's a doctor at the city hospital, and the mother of our little girl." Slowly, Celia raised her eyes to Adrian's, and when they locked, everything in her went still. The cold blue held nothing at all. His attention settled on her. "Is that so? A pleasure, Miss Ward." He held out his hand, and there was nothing for her to do but give him hers. He lifted her fingers and pressed a faint kiss to them, so light it was barely there. Only she could hear what sat under his words. A doctor, a mother, and engaged to one of the city's most prominent men. His thumb rested a breath too long against her knuckles. "You've built an impressive life for yourself, Miss Ward." That faint touch hurt more than open cruelty would have. Her lips trembled. "Thank you," she managed, barely above a whisper. The next words came before she understood how. "You've done well enough for yourself, Mr. Rivera. New Orleans already knows your name." Davis laughed. "Mr. Rivera, I thought hand-kissing went out of style 100 years ago." A small smile touched Adrian's mouth. "Manners don't depend on the era, and a woman should always be treated with the respect she deserves." He looked back at her. "Isn't that right, Miss Ward?" Celia forced herself to smile. "Of course." Davis's gaze moved quickly between the two of them. "Then we'd love to see you at our wedding soon, Mr. Rivera. Wouldn't we, Celia? Our talks may not have gone my way today, but there's no reason we can't stay friends. What do you say?" Adrian inclined his head. "Why not? I wouldn't miss the occasion." The table went quiet for a few seconds. "I'll leave the happy couple to their evening, then." The last words carried something underneath, and as he walked off, his steps seemed to ring in her ears. Davis dropped back into his seat, muttering, "Arrogant son of a bitch! Walks in here like he owns the place. He drank, then turned to her. My family's run this city for 200 years, and he thinks he can push me aside. He set the glass down and looked at her differently. Actually, I think he liked you, Celia. Celia kept her voice low. Don't be ridiculous. He was being polite, nothing more. Whatever was turning over in Davis's head had the look of a plan. Maybe his interest can work in our favor. Her face hardened. What do you mean, Davis? Davis leaned in. The terminal project is huge for both of us. I have the permits and the local influence. He has the capital and the port network. But he won't work with me. Her throat went dry. What does that have to do with me? Davis laid his knife beside his plate. Maybe he'll talk to you. She stared at him. What are you asking me to do? His mouth curved. Go see Rivera tomorrow. Celia set her glass down hard. No, Davis. I'm not a bargaining chip. The smile didn't leave his face. Don't make it ugly, Celia. You'll only talk to him. Convince him to reconsider. Her voice came out furious and low. Let me make sure I understand. You want the woman you plan to marry to go and convince another man to do business with you. You can't stoop any lower than that. Davis was quiet for a few seconds. Then his eyes dropped to the ring on her finger, the one he'd pressed her to wear tonight. Don't make me talk about Cedric, Celia. His tone stayed pleasant. I'm not telling you to sleep with the man. He's clearly taken an interest in you. Tell him what the Keen name means in this city, what I can offer, and why the partnership benefits him, that's all. Her whole body went rigid, her face white. So, we're back to threats. Davis straightened his napkin. Just a short visit. I think you can manage it. Tomorrow you'll see Adrian Rivera. Celia turned her head toward Adrian's table before she could stop herself, and his eyes found Celia Ward one more time that night. Across the room at his own table, Adrian had been aware of her all evening, between the advisor's words and the mayor's questions. Now he looked at her straight on. So, that was the answer. Davis Keen, the ring, the house, the child, the place at her side Adrian had once believed would be his, back when he was still Jonah Reed. She had given Keen all of it. Then she had erased Adrian with a single line on a screen and handed the rest of her life to a man like Davis Keen. The anger came first. Hot, clean, familiar. What sat beneath it was older. The wound he had buried so deep no one had ever touched it. That in the end Celia had looked at him and found him lacking. She had not traded him for a better man. She had traded him for a name, for money, for the safety of belonging to a world that had never intended to let Adrian inside. Fine. She had chosen Keen's power. Adrian would let her watch while he stripped it away, piece by piece. For 2 days, Celia had found reasons not to go. By the third morning, her day off, Davis had run out of patience, and Celia had run out of excuses. She stood in front of the mirror and made herself look. Her fingers went to her collar and straightened it. She met her own eyes in the mirror. You can do this, Celia. She didn't want to look like she'd dressed for him. She didn't want to look like she hadn't bothered either. The thought sat wrong in her stomach. She wasn't doing this for Davis. That was what she kept telling herself anyway. The terminal project meant nothing to her. She had no plan to talk Adrian into any partnership. The whole idea of it, Davis pushing her across a table on the strength of another man's interest, still made her sick to think about, but she needed to face Adrian Rivera, and the man who insisted Jonah Reed had never existed. She had carried 5 years of questions, and she wanted to set every one of them in front of him. How he had vanished with no real explanation, how he had come back wearing another man's name, how he had looked her dead in the eye in that hospital and pretended he had never known her at all. She shifted, and the ring caught the light. Davis's ring, the one he'd pressed her to wear the night before. Her hand drifted toward it, her fingers closed around the stone and held there. Then she drew her hand back. If she slid it off now, she'd have to admit who she was taking it off for. She picked up her bag and walked out. The house was quiet on the stairs. Her mother's door was still shut. Through the back windows she could see Elise out on the lawn with the sitter. Davis had gone before dawn, and all he'd left her was a message. Rivera's office, 11. Don't be late. Celia breathed out hard through her nose and dropped the phone into her bag. She had her hand on the front door when it swung open from the other side. Cedric stepped in. His collar hung open, his hair was a wreck, and his jacket had slid halfway off one shoulder. Stale liquor clung to him. The skin under his eyes had gone dark, but a tired grin pulled at his mouth when he saw her. "Hey, sis." He gave her outfit a quick once-over. "Morning? You heading somewhere?" Celia stayed planted in the doorway. "Where are you coming from at this hour?" The grin faded. "Don't start. Not this morning." Celia cut a look at the clock on the wall. "Morning? Looks to me like your night isn't over yet." He moved a step past her. She didn't give him the room. A sigh dragged out of him. "Get off my back, Celia." 2 days of swallowed anger came up the second she looked at him. "Off your back? The mess you've made of this family isn't enough for you? You're still out drinking and gambling all night and rolling in at sunrise?" His jaw set. "I wasn't gambling." A short laugh broke out of her. "And you expect me to buy that? You really don't care, do you? Not about what you've done to this family. Not about what it's costing the rest of us." Something moved behind his eyes and was gone before she could put a name to it. His voice dropped. "Leave it alone, Celia. Dad and his ego put us here. We're both paying for it." She hitched the strap of her bag higher on her shoulder. "It's too late to play the victim, Cedric. You're 26. You don't work. You've boxed us all into this house, and you handed Davis the perfect weapon to use on me." That stopped him. He stared at her. "I work for Davis, your fiancé, or did you forget?" She closed the distance between them by a step. "Every time I tell him I want out, he sets your debts down in front of me. Says he'll pull his protection and hand you over to the men you owe. I'm tired of paying for your mistakes with my life, Cedric. Do you understand me?" He looked away. For the first time, he had nothing to throw back. She moved past him to the door. His voice came after her. "Where are you going, Celia?" She didn't slow down. "To keep Davis from making good on his threat against you." From the street, the building could have passed for a bank or one of the city's old law firms, all pale stone and glass throwing back the morning light. Then Celia saw the 2 men at the door, black suits, motionless, the shape of guns sitting plain under their jackets. No one here bothered to hide what they were. She stayed on the sidewalk longer than she meant to. Jonah. Who had he really been? She tightened her grip on her bag and made herself walk in. The men searched her before they let her near the doors, her bag, her phone, a wand down her arms and sides, her name murmured to someone upstairs. Only then did they step aside. The glass doors closed behind her with barely a sound, and something cold settled low in her stomach. The father of her child owned a building guarded by armed men. 5 years ago, he had played piano in a back room that smelled of bourbon and smoke, worked the docks, slept in a one-room walk-up with the mattress on the floor. Now she stood in a lobby of black marble and brass, in a quiet so deep she could hear her own heels on the stone, and she wasn't sure she had ever known him at all. The woman behind the long reception desk looked up as Celia reached her, the smile already in place. "Can I help you?" Celia kept her voice even. "I'm here to see Adrian Rivera." The smile held, but the woman's eyes made a slow circuit. Celia's face, the cream dress, the ring on her finger. "Do you have an appointment?" Celia didn't blink. "No." The warmth went out of the smile by a few degrees. "Mr. Rivera doesn't see anyone without one." Celia held the strap of her bag in both hands so they wouldn't do anything she'd regret. "He'll see me." The woman looked at her a second too long, then lifted the phone and gave her name into it low. She listened. She set the phone back down. "He's in a meeting. You're welcome to wait." So Celia waited. She took a chair across the lobby, set her bag beside her, and folded her hands over her knee like a woman with all the time in the world. She didn't have all the time in the world. The minutes dragged. Phones rang somewhere and were answered. The receptionist never looked at her again. 10 minutes. 20. Celia watched the brass elevator doors and thought about the man behind them, deciding exactly how long to leave her sitting there. 40 minutes in, the phone at the desk rang. The woman caught her eye. "You can go up. 23rd floor." Celia rose and walked to the elevator without a word of thanks. The brass doors closed her in. The car climbed so smoothly she felt it only in her ears, and her own face watched her back from the dark, polished wall. Her heart was going too fast. Anger, she told herself. That was all it was. The doors opened on the 23rd floor and a wide, silent corridor. Beyond a wall of glass, the Mississippi moved brown and slow past the rooftops of the quarter. Dark wood, heavy gilt frames, museum-sized paintings, a hush so complete it pressed on her ears. A striking young woman sat at a desk at the far end, sleek blonde hair over one shoulder, her suit fitted close. She glanced up as Celia came toward her. "Miss Ward?" Celia stopped at the desk. "Yes." Nothing in the woman's face moved. "Mr. Rivera's in an important meeting. I couldn't tell you when he'll be free." Celia met her eyes and held them. 40 minutes downstairs, and now she'd been carried all the way up here, only to be set down and made to wait again. She let none of it show. "I'll wait." The woman tipped her head toward a low couch, and Celia sat. The wait upstairs was worse. A half-hour passed, then most of another, and still no one came for her. At last she got to her feet and crossed to the desk. "Is the meeting still not finished?" The woman checked her screen. "Not yet." Celia's patience wore through. "I've been here almost 2 hours." The woman picked up the phone. She waited, and when she spoke, her voice had gone soft, a small smile curving her mouth. "Mr. Rivera, the lady's still here, Miss Ward. She's still waiting for you." The smile held while she listened. By the time she lowered the phone, it was gone. "He's not done yet." Something in Celia went very still. Then a short, disbelieving laugh got out of her, and she shook her head once. "Fine." She lifted her bag onto her shoulder. "Then it seems we have nothing to discuss after all." She turned and started for the elevators, her steps quick on the stone. She had almost reached them when a voice came across the floor behind her, deep and even, the kind of voice a room obeyed. "Miss Ward." Celia stopped. Slowly, she turned toward it. Adrian Rivera stood in the doorway of his office, shoulder against the frame, arms folded, watching her with the easy confidence of a man who had let her wait 2 hours for exactly this. The dark suit, the cold blue eyes that found her across the whole length of the hall, the faint edge of a smile already at his mouth. What a surprise! She couldn't make herself answer. He tilted his head toward the room behind him. "Come in, please." Celia swallowed the first answer that came to her. Then she crossed the floor and went past him into the office, fast, her shoulder nearly brushing his arm. His scent caught her as she passed, darker than she remembered but unmistakably his, and her step faltered for half a breath before she caught it. Adrian came in behind her and shut the door. She rounded on him. "I've been waiting 2 hours, Mr. Rivera." The corner of his mouth lifted, and his brows rose with it, lazy and unbothered. "I'm a busy man." She pulled her arms across her chest. "So I see." He let go of the door handle. "And I don't make time for anyone who turns up without an appointment." The laugh that left her was all edges. "Anyone?" His gaze settled on her face and stayed there. Then he came toward her, taking his time, and the room seemed to draw in tighter with every step. Celia made herself hold still. Her pulse climbed as the distance closed, but she would not be the one to look away. He stopped close enough that she had to lift her chin to keep his eyes. He looked at her first. Then his gaze dropped, slow, to the ring on her finger. His head angled just a fraction. "Tell me, Miss Ward, what could Davis Keene's lovely fiancé possibly want from me?" Celia swallowed. Her own heartbeat seemed to fill the room, loud enough that she half expected him to hear it. She made herself look straight at him. "Why don't you drop the act, Jonah? We both know who you are." His expression didn't move. She let her gaze move over the office, the glass, the dark wood, the man behind the desk wearing a stranger's name. "Who exactly is Adrian Rivera?" Her eyes came back to him and narrowed. "Or should I be asking who Jonah Reed was?" Adrian smiled. He took a step back, turned, and lowered himself into the chair behind his desk like a man with nothing left to prove. "Clearly, neither of us is who we used to be, Miss Ward." Miss Ward. The words landed somewhere under her ribs. He used to say Celia like it was something he meant to keep. Now there was only the cool weight of those 2 words. He leaned back. "We've both moved on. I simply took over the family business I'd kept my distance from for years." He turned his head toward the window, the city spread out behind the glass. "And I see you've built the kind of life your family always wanted for you." Celia's lips parted to answer. He didn't give her the chance. "If that's what you came here to say, I don't have time for it." He checked the time. "The vote for the Port Authority chairmanship starts in a few minutes. I need to be there." He picked up his phone, rose, and started past her toward the door. Her eyes had filled. She blinked hard, and not one tear fell. "I wish you'd never come back," her voice held barely. "I wish I'd never seen you like this. I wish you'd stayed the Jonah Reed I remember." She shook her head, and the smile that touched her mouth was all ache. The one who wasn't afraid to feel something. The one I thought deserved everything I gave him. Look at you now. She turned for the door, fast, done with him. His hand closed around her wrist. Celia spun back. He was close, closer than she'd let anyone stand in years, near enough to feel the warmth of his breath. His voice dropped. "Careful, Celia Ward. You don't know who you're dealing with." She lifted her chin until their eyes were level. "What more can you do to me, Adrian Rivera?" The words came out steady, and that steadiness cost her everything. "You already hurt me far more than my pride." Something moved behind his eyes, surprise, there. And then gone, shut away before she could be sure she'd seen it at all. His grip loosened. He released her wrist, and the cold, unreadable calm returned to his face, as though the moment had never touched him. "I wish you a happy life, with your future husband and your daughter. Exactly the life you deserve." Celia's breath came short and uneven. "Her name is Elise." She held his gaze 1 second longer. "My daughter's name." Then she turned and walked out, and somewhere between his door and the elevator she slid on her sunglasses so no one would see the tears she had refused to let him have. Adrian had taken the other elevator down and reached the lobby in time to see her leave. Through the tall glass of the entrance, he saw Celia step out onto the sidewalk. She made it a few paces, then stopped. Her hand came up. She swiped beneath her eyes with the back of her wrist, once, fast, like she was angry at herself for needing to. Then she slid the glasses back on, crossed to the car at the curb, and got in. Adrian's hand closed into a fist at his side. The muscle in his jaw worked. "Mr. Rivera?" One of the men near the door had come up beside him. "Is there a problem?" Adrian didn't look at him. "Nothing's wrong. Get back to your post." The car pulled out into traffic, and he watched it until it was gone. Her words followed him back toward the elevators. Marcel fell into step beside him, the way he had for years. He waited until they were clear of the front desk. "Was that Celia Ward?" Adrian nodded once. "Yes." He pressed the call button. "Did you get me what I asked for?" The doors opened, and they stepped in. Marcel waited for them to close. "I did. Her father, Etienne Ward, died of a heart attack 2 years ago. For the past year, the whole family's been living under Davis Keene's roof." Adrian's gaze cut to him. "The family." "The family," Marcel nodded. "The company started collapsing 3 years ago. When Etienne died, the full weight of the debt came down on the rest of them. Cedric Ward has spent years gambling, drinking, and living like someone else would always pay the bill. He ran up debts bad enough to put his life in danger and dragged the family down with him. Keene cleared all of it." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "So Keene saved them?" Marcel almost smiled. "I wouldn't call it that." The elevator stopped. They stepped out and kept walking. Adrian slowed. "Then what would you call it?" "Keene already owns a couple of hotels and a casino." Marcel kept his voice low. "The casino Cedric Ward owed all that money to?" "Keene's the silent partner. So Cedric was never really in debt to a stranger. He was in debt to Keene from the start." Adrian stopped outside his office. His hand on the door handle. He didn't open it. "And the child?" Marcel let a moment pass before he answered. "A girl, born in March 2022. Registered as Elise Ward." Marcel's voice dropped. The father's name was left blank. Adrian went still. The hand on the door handle tightened until his knuckles whitened. Somewhere behind him Marcel was still talking, but the words had stopped reaching him. There was only the date, and the empty line where a father's name should have been, and Celia's voice returning with brutal clarity. "You already hurt me far more than my pride." For 1 second, he forgot to breathe. No. It couldn't be. He told himself that and didn't believe it. Dinner was laid out in Davis's grand dining room, the way it always was. Margie, Cedric, Celia and Davis sat along the long table. Crystal caught the light, and the silver lay in perfect order on either side of every plate. Davis looked around the room, pleased with himself. Now this is what I call a family dinner. Margie smiled at him. Bless you, Davis. You're the one who keeps us all under one roof. Celia set her fork down on her plate. Davis ignored the small sound and turned to Cedric. I've been considering a position for you at the company. Cedric lifted his head, caught off guard, and for a moment had no answer. Davis went on. But first you'll have to prove you can handle some responsibility, showing up on time, staying sober, finishing what you start. Cedric's mouth thinned. Are you hiring me or trying to teach me manners? Margie cut in at once. Cedric, Davis gave a soft laugh. Once you understand the difference, you might finally make yourself useful. Cedric's hand closed hard around his glass, but he didn't fire back. Davis's gaze slid to Celia. Of course, sometimes you have to give people a chance just to find out whether they're any use at all. The food seemed to lodge in her throat. She reached for her water glass and couldn't bring herself to drink. I'm not hungry. She pushed her chair back. I'll go check on Elise. Enjoy your dinner. The smile dropped off Davis's face. Celia walked out of the room and onto the terrace. The night was cool. A thin mist lay over the lake, and far out, the lights of a few boats drifted slowly across the dark water. She took a cigarette from her bag. She'd quit months ago. As a doctor, she knew better than anyone what she was doing. Tonight, she didn't care. The lighter caught on the third try, her hands too unsteady for the first two, and she drew the smoke in deep. The door behind her opened. Davis crossed to her and lifted the cigarette from her mouth before she could stop him. Celia rounded on him. He looked at it, dropped it to the stone, and ground it out under his shoe. Ah, Celia. There was something almost tender in his voice. You're a doctor. You should know better than this. He touched her cheek. And you know I hate the smell. Under his touch, her skin crawled, every nerve in her wanting to pull back. She turned out of his reach. What do you want, Davis? He tilted his head, his mouth curving. I want to hear how your meeting with Rivera went, of course. Celia folded her arms across her chest. It didn't go well. Davis's eyes sharpened. What did he say? She held his look. He's not a man anyone can persuade. Rude, arrogant, far too sure of himself. He kept me waiting 2 hours, then made it clear he has no interest in doing business with you. Davis's jaw tightened. Celia kept going. So I was no help to you. I couldn't change his mind. A bitter smile crossed her face, and she opened both hands at her sides. Is that what you wanted to hear? Davis let out a short, irritated laugh. Well, he stepped toward her. So, Rivera wasn't impressed. Apparently I'm still the only man you have any power over. He set his hand at her waist and pulled her in. Celia pressed both palms to his chest and shoved him back, hard. Don't touch me. Davis backed up only half a step. His eyes went cold. Don't talk to me like that, baby. His voice softened as he closed the space again. You know, I love you. Celia backed away until her spine met the terrace wall. Stay away from me, Davis. He watched her a moment. Then, as if none of it had happened, he straightened the cuff of his jacket. I picked out the perfect gown for you. I want you to go try it on tomorrow. Celia answered as though she hadn't heard him. I want you to leave Cedric alone. Davis's brows rose. Leave him alone? I'm offering him a position most men would work 10 years to earn. He spread his hands. One he hasn't earned. Your spoiled, good-for-nothing brother, who's never finished a thing in his life. And here I am, still trying to hand him a future. Celia leveled a finger at him. You've gone too far, Davis Keene. His face hardened. This time her voice didn't shake. This marriage isn't happening, and I'm going to find a way to be free of you. She shouldered past him and went inside. Davis stood alone on the terrace, his expression darkened. Out past the Keene dock, where the private channel ran into the lake, a small dark boat sat low on the water with its lights off. Adrian Rivera stood on the back deck. He and Marcel had come to inspect the private channel and the landing that linked the Keene grounds to the lake, but the moment Celia stepped out onto the terrace, the rest of it stopped mattering to him. From across the water, he had seen everything. Davis pulling the cigarette from her mouth, his palm against her cheek, the way he'd taken her by the waist and drawn her in, and the way Celia had shoved him off. He couldn't make out all of it. But her last words carried across the water through the dark. This marriage isn't happening, and I'm going to find a way to be free of you. Adrian's eyes stayed on the lit terrace door. Celia disappeared inside. His fingers tightened on the boat's metal rail. Celia! The name barely left him. His gaze never left the house. What kind of life is this? His jaw set. What is Keene holding over you? A few days later, on her day off, Celia was halfway out the front door with Elise when Davis called after her. Celia, sweetheart, his voice stopped her at the door. Your gown fitting is at 1. Don't be late. Celia didn't turn around. I'll be there. She took Elise's hand and stepped out into the morning. The park was a few blocks from the house, and for the next hour, her life almost felt like her own. Elise ran straight for the swings, where a couple of other kids were already playing, and Celia settled onto a bench with a book she'd been trying to finish for a month. For a while, she let herself watch nothing but her daughter's dark curls lifting in the light each time she went up. She breathed, and for once, it didn't hurt. Across the street, Adrian sat in the back of a parked car, watching the same swing. Marcel followed his line of sight. You think she might be yours? It wasn't a question. You left New Orleans in June of 2021. The timing works. Adrian didn't answer right away. He was watching the little girl's dark hair rise and fall as she swung. Nothing about Celia Ward has ever been simple. His voice stayed low. She could be mine. Then he turned his head away, or she might not be. Marcel started to say something, then his gaze cut past him to the bench across the park. Adrian. Marcel straightened beside him. Something's wrong. 2 men were crossing the grass toward Celia. Adrian was out of the car before Marcel finished the sentence. A shadow fell across Celia's page. She looked up. 2 men stood over her bench. One was enormous, a scar carved down the side of his face. The other hung back, scanning the park. The big one lowered himself onto the bench beside her. Close. Too close. Celia closed the book over her thumb. Who are you? The big man gave her an ugly, knowing grin. You're Celia Ward, aren't you? Cedric Ward's sister. Her spine went straight. Every muscle in her went tight. What do you want? He took his time. Funny thing. Your brother sleeps in a mansion, and the men he owes are still waiting to get paid. His eyes moved over her, slow. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Celia shot to her feet. The man rose with her, unbothered, and toyed with a strand of her hair. Pay me what your brother can't. Celia knocked his hand away. Don't touch me. The grin didn't move. Or one morning somebody's going to find him in a dumpster. Celia made herself hold his stare. Davis Keene paid those debts. He shook his head once. Keene didn't erase that debt. His voice dropped. He just changed who you owe. A small voice carried across the park. Mommy! Elise was running toward her, arms out. Cold flooded her. Stay there, Elise, her voice broke on the name. Don't come over here. Before Elise could reach her, a pair of arms lifted her safely off the ground. Celia's breath stopped. She spun toward the man holding her child. Adrian stood a few feet away. Elise settled easily against his chest. For a second, Celia couldn't move. The man she'd buried 5 years ago was holding her daughter, and Elise wasn't even afraid of him. Marcel came up beside him, calm and in no hurry. Adrian's gaze had already found the 2 men. Gentlemen! The word came out cold and even. Step away from her. The big one's grin slipped. He muttered something to the other, and Celia caught the 2 words that mattered. Adrian Rivera. Marcel let his jacket fall open. The gun beneath it was impossible to miss. That was all it took. Both men backed away, then turned and moved off fast, not quite running. Adrian looked at Celia. "Are you all right?" Her chest wouldn't fill. She held out her arms. "Elise." Adrian looked down at the little girl he held. She wasn't crying. She was studying him, head tipped, the way kids did before they made up their minds about a person. "Elise," the name came out soft. "That's a pretty name." She smiled up at him, easy and bright. "Who are you?" He met her look. "I'm Adrian." She weighed that, then asked the real question. "Are you my mommy's friend?" Then she looked straight at him, and he saw her eyes, pale blue, clear as water. For a moment he couldn't look away. The park, the men, even Celia seemed to recede, until there was only the child in his arms, and those eyes watching him as though they already knew him. His chest tightened around a feeling he had no name for. His arm drew her in before he caught himself. Beside him, Marcel had gone quiet, looking at the child the same way. The corner of Adrian's mouth lifted, barely there. He swallowed once. "I was." Celia's voice cut between them. "Give me my daughter." Adrian lifted his gaze to her face. Then he passed Elise back to her, both of them moving carefully, as though the child might somehow come apart between them. A car door shut behind her. Davis's driver crossed toward them fast. "Miss Ward, are you all right?" Celia raised a hand without looking away from Adrian. "I'm fine, Pierre." The driver stopped a few yards off, close enough to see them, and stayed there. Adrian's attention came back to her. "What did those men want with you?" Her arms had closed tight around Elise. "What are you doing here? Don't tell me this is a coincidence. You showing up here right now?" He didn't look away from her. "I had business nearby. I saw you from the car. Then I saw them." Celia swallowed and kept the tremor out of her voice. "It's handled, and it's none of your concern." She turned and walked fast toward her car, Elise on her hip. Adrian didn't move. He watched Celia carry her away, Elise looking back at him over her mother's shoulder. When he finally turned, Marcel was watching him, one brow raised, the start of a smile on his face. "I'd know those eyes anywhere, Adrian." That afternoon, Celia was already bracing herself for the night shift, moving fast down the hospital corridor, when Davis stepped into her path. She pulled up short. He stood there with a bouquet of flowers and the easy smile of a man who believed he belonged anywhere he chose to be. "What are you doing here?" Two nurses passed behind him, and she dropped her voice. "I told you not to come to the hospital while I'm on shift." Davis held the flowers out to her. "I missed my fiancé." She moved to step around him, and his free hand closed around her upper arm. The smile stayed exactly where it was. His fingers didn't. They tightened until the pressure burned through her sleeve, and she felt the bones of his grip down to the muscle. "You missed your gown fitting this afternoon." She pulled against his grip. "Let go of me." His hand only set harder. "I had things to do, and I already told you. I'm not wearing that gown." Davis let his gaze travel the corridor, slow, making sure that anyone watching saw nothing but a doting fiancé, surprising the woman he loved. When he came back to her, nothing in his face had moved. His voice dropped, low and through his teeth. "We're getting married in 20 days, Celia. You'll wear that gown." His thumb ground into her arm. "If Cedric and Elise mean anything to you, you'll stop fighting me on every little thing. I've had about enough of it." It took everything she had to keep her face still. Down the corridor, a chart clattered onto a counter. A phone rang, the ordinary noise of her one safe place going on around her, and not one person saw what he was doing to her. A voice reached them from a few feet off. "Doctor, could you take a look at me? I'm not feeling right." Celia tore her arm free. The skin under her sleeve throbbed where his fingers had been. "Don't come here again while I'm working." She left Davis standing with his flowers and crossed to the man who'd called out, "Come with me." She drew back the curtain of the nearest bay and steered him toward the gurney. He sat while she snapped on her gloves, and then she got a proper look at his face, and her hands slowed. "Aren't you the man who was with Adrian Rivera at the park this morning?" Marcel smiled, easy and unbothered. "I am. Life's full of coincidences." Celia set a hand on her hip. "What's wrong with you?" a little nausea. She took his pulse, checked his eyes, pressed her fingers under his jaw. Marcel sat through all of it without a word of complaint, looking far too comfortable for a man who claimed to be sick. Inside a minute, she stepped back. "There's not a thing wrong with you." Her eyes sharpened on him. "Were you following me?" His expression didn't shift. "After this morning, Mr. Rivera wanted someone keeping an eye on you." Celia stared at him. His gaze moved to the curtain and stayed there a second too long. "The man out in the corridor, he had a tight hold on your arm." So he'd seen it. He'd been sitting out there the whole time, watching, before he'd ever breathed a word about feeling sick. "That's fine." She peeled off one glove. "That was my fiancé, Davis Keene." Marcel's brows lifted. "Ah." His gaze drifted toward the curtain again. "He comes off a little controlling." Celia stripped off the second glove and dropped both in the bin. "He's not the only one, apparently." She turned to go before he could answer. "Tell Mr. Rivera to keep his distance." She pulled it open and walked back out into the corridor, the print of Davis's hand still warm on her arm. First, the man she'd loved had looked her in the eye and pretended not to know her. Then he'd stood in his glass tower and judged the life she'd built without knowing one true thing about it. Now he had men trailing her through her own hospital and called it looking out for her. She was a long way past men who handed her a leash and called it love. Adrian took the call at the window of his office, the river crawling past, brown and heavy below. Marcel's voice came through, low. "It's done. She made me as the man from the park inside a minute. Smart, that one." A car door shut on his end. "Her fiancé was there when I came in. He had her by the arm, hard. I didn't like the look of it, so I went in." Adrian kept his hand pressed to the cold glass. "You did the right thing." A barge slid under the bridge below. "How hard?" Marcel didn't soften it. "Hard enough that she's wearing it under her sleeve right now." Something went tight, low in Adrian's chest. He kept it out of his voice. "The whole thing with Davis Keene stinks." He watched the water move. "Find out exactly what connects him to Celia's brother. All of it." Marcel's answer came fast. "On it!" Adrian turned the thought over. "Put 2 men on her. I want eyes on her around the clock, and I want them good enough that she never sees them." Marcel came right back. "Done." He went quiet. The dark glass gave him back a faint outline of his own face, and behind it, without his asking for it, a pair of pale blue eyes that had looked up at him like they already knew him. "One more thing." He turned from the window. "The Keene house. There's a woman who looks after the little girl. Find out where she lives." Road noise filled the line for a moment. When Marcel spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Why?" Adrian's jaw set. "Because I'm done waiting for the truth to find me." Saturday evening, Celia stood in front of the mirror in a dress that wasn't hers, pinning up the last of her hair for the hospital's anniversary gala. The door opened behind her without a knock. She didn't turn around. "Davis, you don't come into my room without knocking." He came in anyway, a slim velvet box in one hand. He stepped close behind her, lifted a diamond necklace from the box, and laid it against her throat. The clasp clicked at the back of her neck, and the stones settled cold against her skin. His eyes found hers in the mirror. "There. Now you look like my fiancé." Whatever it had cost, it meant nothing to her. It felt less like a gift than something locked into place. She reached for the small bag on the dresser. "I'm not going with you, Davis. Plus ones aren't invited. Or did you forget?" His laugh came easy and false. "I'm not coming as your guest. I'll be there as one of the hospital's largest donors, sweetheart." Celia picked up the bag and walked toward the door. "Then you'll be going alone. I need to be there early to help with setup." She didn't look back at him on her way out. In the hall, Marie stood with Elise settled on her hip. Celia leaned in and kissed the warm cheek her daughter turned up to her. "Mommy has to work tonight, baby. Marie's going to put you to bed. All right?" Elise wrapped both arms around her neck. "Will you lie down with me when you come home?" Celia kissed the tip of her nose. "Of course I will, sweet girl." For a moment the house, the dress, the stones at her collarbone, all of it fell away. This was why she endured everything else. Then Marie shifted Elise higher on her hip, and Celia had to let her go. Margie was watching from the foot of the stairs, a glass of whiskey in her hand. "You look beautiful, honey." Celia met her in the entryway. "I'm surprised you're not coming." Her mother turned the glass slowly, the ice catching the light. "I'll start going to these things once you're married to Davis. I'm not about to parade in there and remind everyone we're living here on his charity." Celia looked at her with the ghost of a smile. "Must be hard, living with the consequences of your own choices." She didn't give her mother the chance to answer. At the door of the mansion, the necklace shifted cold against her throat, and her hand rose to it before she could stop herself. The diamonds weren't what she felt. What she felt was the weight of being kept. The hospital's 50th anniversary gala filled the Royal Garden Terrace at the Omni Royal Orleans. Lantern light, wrought iron railings, the quarter glowing below, and enough old New Orleans money to make everyone stand a little straighter. Celia moved through it easily, a glass of white wine in her hand, laughing with the nurses and residents she'd worked beside for years. Every few minutes her eyes went to the entrance. Davis still hadn't arrived, and for once she let herself breathe. Then the nurse beside her went still. "Well, who just walked in?" A resident gave a low laugh. "Good Lord, look at him." Celia turned to look, and the smile died on her face. Adrian Rivera had come through the doors, Marcel a step behind him, both men drawing every eye in the room without seeming to try. "What is he doing here?" Her voice came out lower than she meant it to. Her friend nudged her shoulder. "Wait, do you know him, Celia?" Celia kept her eyes on her wine. "Not really." Her hand wasn't quite steady as she turned away from the room and looked down into the pale gold of the Chardonnay. The wine pulled her back before she could stop it. A jazz bar years ago, low and warm, Jonah at the piano in the corner. She'd never had to order. The Chardonnay would already be waiting by the time she sat down, and he'd find her across the room and give her that slow half-wink, like the two of them were in on something no one else could see. It belonged to a life that wasn't hers anymore. A few minutes later, a voice came from just behind her, low and close at the back of her neck. "Miss Ward?" She knew who it was before she turned, every nerve in her already awake. She turned, and she was looking up at Adrian Rivera. His gaze dropped to her glass. For half a second, something moved at the corner of his mouth, as if he'd remembered the very thing she had. Then it was gone. Her throat had gone dry. "Mr. Rivera, I didn't expect to see you here." He lifted a brow, the smile easy now, nothing behind it she could reach. "Of course, it's an important night for our city." That pulled a short, disbelieving laugh out of her. "Our city? You moved here, what, a few months ago? You've claimed it awfully fast, unless, of course, you lived here before." Adrian didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, then came back to her eyes, and what was in it ran deeper than the question deserved. Before she understood what was happening, his fingertips brushed the small of her back through the thin fabric of her dress. The touch went through her like a current, nothing like the way her skin recoiled from Davis. He leaned in, his voice low against her ear. "I need to speak with you tonight. It's important." Then he straightened and gave the women beside her an easy nod. "Ladies?" And he was gone, crossing the floor as though nothing at all had passed between them. Celia stood there, unsure whether the last minute had been real. Her friend was staring at her, delighted and bewildered. "Celia, what in the world was that? I thought you two didn't know each other." Celia lifted her glass and drank down what was left of it. The room kept talking around her, but all she could hear was the beat of her own heart. For the rest of the hour, Celia tried not to look at him. She lost the fight every few minutes. Across the terrace, Adrian stood among the men who ran this city, composed and at ease, listening more than he spoke. Marcel seemed to catch her looking every time, and whenever their eyes met, he gave her the same small, courteous nod. Then the air by the doors changed, and she knew without turning that Davis had arrived. He crossed to her with that practiced smile, slid a hand to the small of her back, and let his voice carry just far enough for the people nearby. "You look magnificent as always, the most beautiful woman here." "Thank you." She gave him nothing else and kept her attention on the stage. A man in a tailored suit had stepped up to the microphone, taking the crowd through 50 years of the hospital's history and the families who had helped keep its doors open. Then he gestured toward Davis, and we owe so much of that to the Keene family, who helped lay this hospital's very foundation. Davis, would you join me? Davis buttoned his jacket and made his way up, at home in the light. The applause carried him. The Keenes have given this city more than I can list tonight. The host waited for the crowd to settle. And now it is my privilege to welcome the man whose gift this year was the largest in our history, Mr. Adrian Rivera. Applause broke out again, louder this time. Up there, Davis's smile held, but the ease had gone out of it. Celia saw the exact moment the applause got under his skin. Adrian crossed to the stage without rushing, every eye following him. He took Davis's hand and shook it, and only someone watching closely would have caught the way Davis's grip tightened a half-second too long. The friend beside her leaned in, delighted. Would you look at that? 2 of the richest, best-looking men in the city on one stage. Celia didn't answer. Her heart was beating too high and too fast, and she couldn't make it settle. When the music began, the floor filled, and Davis was pulled into a knot of people who mattered, the mayor on one side of him, the hospital's chief of medicine on the other, both demanding his attention. Celia moved toward the glass doors that opened onto the terrace. She stopped there, her gaze moving over the crowd for the dark suit and the broad shoulders she should have been able to spot anywhere. She couldn't find him. Then his voice came low at her ear. Were you looking for me? Heat climbed the back of her neck. She didn't turn right away. You're awfully sure of yourself, Adrian. His hand closed gently around her elbow. Come with me. Celia's eyes went straight to Davis. He was still deep in talk with the mayor, his back half to her, noticing nothing. She brought her gaze back to Adrian and lifted her chin. Davis is right there. I don't know what you think we have to discuss, but this isn't the time. You already said what you had to say in your office. The corner of his mouth moved, there and gone. Then his face went serious. Are you afraid of Davis Keene, Celia? Her throat tightened around the answer. That's not the word for it. With his hand still at her elbow, he guided her past the lantern light and into the garden until the hedges screened them from the terrace and the noise of the party faded behind them. She pulled her arm free. What do you want? He didn't look away from her. Why are you with Davis Keene? His voice had gone low and even. He's a dirty man. Her jaw set. From where I'm standing, you're no different from him. What is this, Adrian Rivera? You suddenly decided to know me, remembered you used to be Jonah Reed. He stepped closer, and Celia gave ground until the rough trunk met her back. His fingers hovered at her cheek, close enough that she felt the warmth of them not quite touching. Tell me something. Did you leave me for him? She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. What did you just say? She caught his wrist and pushed his hand aside. Did you hit your head somewhere? You're the one who walked out on me. No call, nothing. Your phone was dead. Your apartment was empty. You were gone from the club. Her eyes had filled and she let them. You want to know what they told me down at the port? That you'd sent word you'd married some girl in Vegas and never looked back, that you'd fallen for someone and left this whole city behind. Her voice cracked on the last of it. You left me here to believe every word of it. Adrian swallowed hard and shook his head. No, Celia, none of that is true. I would never have left you. The ground felt unsteady under her. Then why did you disappear without telling me? His fingers slid lightly into the hair at her temple. Not here. Come with me. She barely got the name out. Davis. He didn't hesitate. I'll handle Davis. He took her hand and led her through the garden and along the side of the hotel to the waiting cars. He waved off the driver, who stepped forward. I'll drive. He opened the door himself and held it for her. Get in. I know a place where we can talk. In the dark of the car, Celia watched his profile while he drove. 5 years. The same questions came back, the ones she had asked herself 1,000 times. Had he died somewhere, or married someone? Why had he never once picked up a phone and called her? Had those 6 months, all that heat and certainty, been real at all? She had stopped being sure of even that. Then she thought of Elise, of the pale blue eyes that found her every morning, clear as water, and the doubt went quiet. Whatever else was true, that much was real. When the car turned onto Frenchman Street, Celia smiled before she could help it. Adrian found a spot and cut the engine. He came around, opened her door, and held out his hand. "Celia," his voice was low, "come with me." She didn't take it. She stepped out on her own and started up the street toward the old club, the brass and the smoke and the music spilling out the doors. "The last time I came here was 5 years ago, asking everyone where you'd gone." He reached for her hand, and she drew it back. "Are we going to do this like nothing happened?" Adrian stopped and looked at her. "No, Celia, too much." Something moved behind his eyes. "But I came back carrying 5 years of anger at you, and that's the reason I'm standing in this city tonight. Now I want to know what really happened." He offered it again and tipped his head toward the doors. "Our usual table. We'll talk through all of it." Celia swallowed. If she took it, she was terrified she would never be able to let go. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. The blue lantern looked exactly the way Celia remembered it. The dark wood, the amber light, the narrow bar worn smooth by decades of elbows. In the far corner, the small stage still held its upright piano under a single brass lamp. The old smell of wood and bourbon and smoke still lived in the walls. Only a few tables were taken, most of them by couples leaning close over the music. This was where she had first seen Jonah Reed. He'd been at that piano with his sleeves shoved to his elbows and his head bent over the keys, playing as though the rest of the room had stopped existing. She'd stood by the door too long that night, unable to move until he looked up and found her. Adrian led her to the same corner table they had always taken and pulled out her chair, and she sat without a word. Instead of the seat across from her, he took the one beside her. Before she could ask why, an older man came out from behind the bar and stopped so short that the towel slipped from his hand against the wood. For a moment, he only stared. "I don't believe it." Adrian turned toward the sound as the man came closer, his shock breaking into a wide grin. "Jonah Reed, is that really you?" He turned to Celia, and the years seemed to fall away. "And beautiful, Celia. The two of you, back at that table." Adrian stood, and the smile that broke over him was nothing like the careful one he wore for the rest of the world. "Monsieur Hébert." They embraced. Hébert held him out at arm's length and looked him over, taking in the cut of the suit, the watch, the quiet authority that had replaced the young piano player he remembered. "Look at you, Jonah. You've done well for yourself." Adrian gave a small nod. "You could say that." Hébert studied him another second, and then it landed. "Rivera." He spread both hands. "You're the Rivera this whole city won't stop talking about?" A low laugh came out of Adrian, warm and real. "Apparently." Hébert pulled him in again and thumped him once between the shoulders. From the table, Celia couldn't look away. For the first time since he'd walked back into her life 2 weeks ago, she could see Jonah inside him. He was there in the looseness of that smile, the warmth around his eyes, the way he let this man hold him without going stiff. He looked almost exactly the way she remembered. Almost. Then his jacket shifted as he sat back down, and she caught the dark edge of the holster at his side. Hébert glanced between them, knowing. "The usual?" Celia folded her hands in her lap. "Yes, please. Chardonnay." Adrian opened his mouth, but Hébert raised a finger first. "Boulevardier." Adrian laughed again. "You remember." Hébert didn't miss a step. "I remember everything that matters." He went back toward the bar, still shaking his head like he expected them to vanish if he looked away too long. The warmth she had just seen in him was fading, though not entirely. She faced him fully. "So, your father's family. You never told me about them." He settled back, one hand resting at the edge of the table. "I told you. I didn't speak to my father." His glance went briefly to the piano. "My mother and my uncle were the only family I had, the Reeds." She held herself steady. "So what changed?" His fingers tightened a little against the wood. "When I left New Orleans, I went to my father's people. Rivera was his name. Adrian was mine too. I'd just never used it." She went still. Your mother wanted you kept away from them. He didn't soften it. Yes. It wasn't a question. And you went anyway. What came next was so quiet she almost missed it. You ended things with a message. For a second she thought she'd misheard him. What message? He didn't move. The one you sent the night before I left. She shook her head, lost. I never sent you a message. Something in him gave way, small but unmistakable. He leaned in over the small table, closing the distance between them. It came from your number. Her voice sharpened. Then someone used my phone, because I didn't send it. I didn't leave you. He looked down at the table between them, and she watched the memory move through him before he spoke. It said you'd had your fun. His voice had gone rough. That I was good enough for 6 months, but not good enough to stand beside you. That a man with no education and no name had no business thinking he belonged in your world. He still didn't look up. That I could never afford the life you wanted. That you hoped I hadn't been stupid enough to think we were equals. Her breath caught. Those weren't my words. His jaw tightened. The answer came before she could hold it back. My father. He must have done it. Her mind went back through closed doors and cold rooms, through a contempt her father had never worked very hard to hide. And if he did, her voice thinned, my mother may have known. Hébert set the Chardonnay in front of her and the Boulevardier in front of Adrian. Whatever he read in their faces kept him quiet, and he went back to the bar without his grin. Celia waited until he was gone. Why didn't you come to me? Her fingers closed around the stem of the glass, though she didn't lift it. Why would you believe one message after everything we were? He looked away, and for a moment there was only the low music and the hum of the room between them. Because I already believed every word of it. Her grip loosened, his mouth curved, but there was nothing like humor in it. The message didn't put the fear in me, it only gave it your voice. Celia shook her head, her eyes filling. You knew I never cared about money. Adrian's gaze dropped to his drink. His thumb moved along the rim of the glass, and he took a long swallow before he answered. I knew, but I never felt like enough for you, and instead of admitting that, I blamed you for making me feel it. Celia's chest tightened. Did I ever once make you feel you weren't enough for me? A bitter laugh broke from him. No. You didn't make me feel small. I did that to myself. His eyes came back to hers. Your education, your family, the way you walked into a room like you belonged there. I loved all of it, and every part of it reminded me of what I wasn't. His jaw worked once. The message only confirmed it, so I ran. He was quiet a moment, his thumb still against the glass. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, rougher than before. I loved you so much it frightened me, and losing you the way that message said I had, I couldn't breathe through that kind of pain, so I got as far from it as I could. His eyes lifted to hers, and after enough time passed, I didn't have the courage to come back. I didn't think I could survive seeing your face and being a stranger to you. A single tear slipped down Celia's cheek. She wiped it away at once with the back of her hand. He turned the glass slowly on the wood. Until tonight, I thought you'd done exactly what that message said. I came back wanting you to hurt the way I had. I thought it would make the past smaller. His mouth twisted. It didn't. Celia's voice came low. Did seeing me powerless make you feel better? No. There was no hesitation in it. Adrian took her hand. It made me realize I'd been wrong about you. You weren't powerless. You were surviving. His thumb moved once over her knuckles. I know what happened to your family. I know you wouldn't stay with Keane for money. Celia's fingers went still beneath his. His other hand came up, slow, and brushed a loose strand of hair back from her cheek. The backs of his fingers grazed her skin on the way, and just like that, 5 years fell away. Heat climbed through her before she could think to stop it, the same pull that had ruined her at 24 when this man's hands had been the only thing she trusted. She knew she should move away. She didn't. He leaned in, His fingertips traced the line of her jaw, tilting her face up, and his mouth came close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath against her lips. Her whole body lit, strung tight between the part of her that remembered everything and the part that knew how much this could cost her. Then his lips brushed hers. Barely there. A question more than a kiss. Don't, some part of her warned. Don't do this. But her body had stopped listening to it 5 years ago, and it wasn't listening now. She closed the last inch herself, her mouth finding his, her hand fisting in the front of his shirt to pull him closer. For one suspended moment there was no Davis, no 5 years, no lie, only his mouth on hers and the warmth of him all the way through her. He drew back just far enough to speak, his forehead nearly against hers, both of them unsteady. He held her there. "So why are you still with him, Celia? Is it because of Elise?" She looked toward the stage, toward the piano where Jonah had once played for her. Adrian swallowed. "Is she his?" When she didn't answer, his fingers tightened around hers. "Celia, is she mine?" Celia stared at Adrian, unable to draw a full breath. The question still hung in the air between them, waiting. One part of her wanted to tell him so badly that the truth was already rising to her lips. The other part held back, afraid of what would happen once he knew, of how quickly the fragile control she had fought to build might pass into someone else's hands, should she tell him. Adrian's phone rang before she could decide. He glanced at the screen without taking his eyes from her. "I need to answer this." Marcel's voice came through the line. "Adrian, we can't keep Davis occupied much longer. He's looking for Celia." Adrian's expression hardened. "Speak for me. Tell him there's a chance we may reconsider the partnership. Keep him there another hour." Marcel hesitated. "Are you sure, Adrian?" He didn't waver. "Do as I said." He ended the call and set the phone beside his drink. Celia's worry must have shown. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. "Don't be afraid." His grip was warm, his voice quiet, but the question was still there in his eyes. Before she could answer, Hébert's voice carried from the stage. "Jonah Reed." Adrian turned. Hébert stood beneath the brass lamp with the microphone in his hand. "We're not letting you leave tonight without playing something for us, just like old times. Come on." Faces turned toward their table as applause spread through the room. Adrian shook his head. "No, Hébert, not tonight." Celia looked toward the piano, then back at him. "Go." Her hand eased out of his. "Play something. I want to hear you." Hébert came to the table and caught Adrian by the arm. "Come on, Jonah Reed." Adrian rose reluctantly and let Hébert lead him toward the stage. He sat down at the piano. Before touching the keys, he looked at Celia. She rested her chin against one hand, her Chardonnay in front of her, watching him the way she had years ago. Then Adrian began to play A Kiss to Build a Dream On. The first notes pulled her back 5 years. Jonah's small apartment, his mouth moving down her body until she arched up off the sheets, until the only sound she could make was his name. The low things he used to say against her ear, rough and certain, telling her exactly what he was going to do. The way he watched her face the whole time, like he wanted to feel every second of it through her. She had come apart under him more nights than she could count, his name and broken sounds spilling out of her. For a few moments, she could feel all of it again. Then, the memory turned. Jonah was gone. His phone was off, his apartment empty, and when she learned she was pregnant, there had been no one beside her. The nights that followed came back with the music, the hours she had cried until there were no tears left, trying to understand how the man she loved could vanish without one word. Celia's fingers loosened around the stem of her glass. On stage, Adrian kept playing, but she no longer knew whether she was looking at Adrian Rivera or Jonah Reed. Past and present pressed together until she could barely breathe. She still loved him, and if she stayed there any longer, she would tell him, about Elise, about everything. Celia leaned back from the table, but the distance changed nothing. She pushed back her chair, stood and reached for her bag. Adrian saw her as she turned toward the door. His hand stopped on the keys. Celia crossed the room quickly, her vision blurred by the tears she refused to let fall. She had almost reached the entrance when she heard the piano bench scrape behind her. "Celia!" She stepped outside and lifted her hand toward a passing taxi. It slowed at the curb and she climbed in before Adrian reached the door. "Celia. Celia, stop." The taxi pulled away. Through the rear window, she saw him standing outside the blue lantern until the taxi turned the corner. This time, Celia was the one who had run. Celia climbed the stairs with her shoes hanging from one hand, the house dark and quiet around her. She eased open Elise's door. Her daughter lay curled under the blanket, one fist tucked beneath her cheek, her dark curls spread across the pillow. Celia leaned down and pressed a kiss to her hair, careful not to wake her. For a moment, the weight of the night lifted. Then she stepped back into the hall and turned toward her own room. A hand reached out of the darkness and closed around her arm. Her breath stopped. Davis stood close behind her, his eyes hard with anger. "So, you made it home after all." He pulled her down the hall and into her room, and the door shut behind them. He let go of her arm. "Where were you?" Celia kept her voice level. "I was talking with a friend." Davis tilted his head. "Oh, is that so?" His tone stayed soft. "And who was this friend?" She backed up until the wall met her spine. "Get out of my room." He didn't move toward the door. "I have always been good to you, Celia. I've shown nothing but patience with you and your family." His fingers came up and traced the line of her cheek. "But lying to me, that I can't stand." Her skin crawled beneath his hand, every instinct urging her to pull away. She held still and let none of it show. Davis lowered his hand. "You're not leaving this room tomorrow, Celia. You'll sit here all day and think until you come to your senses, and tomorrow you'll tell me exactly what you've been up to." His mouth curved. "By the way, do you know who I'm meeting with tomorrow?" "Mr. Rivera. Adrian Rivera. It seems the idea of a partnership is beginning to appeal to him after all." He raised one finger in warning. "We'll talk tomorrow." He turned and walked out. Celia followed, but the door closed before she reached it. The key turned in the lock. "Davis, you can't lock me in here! Davis!" The next morning, Adrian stood before the windows of his office at Rivera Group, New Orleans spread out below him. Marcel stood near the desk, an open folder in his hands. "So, the plan is to demand $5 million up front." Marcel glanced up from the page. "You think Keene will agree?" Adrian kept his attention on the city below. "He's greedy and he needs to feel in control. We cost him once. Now we'll offer him something too profitable to walk away from." The intercom sounded before Marcel could answer. "Mr. Davis Keene is here, sir." Adrian didn't turn from the glass. "Send him in." The door opened a moment later, and Davis walked in with the ease of a man used to being welcomed wherever he went. "Mr. Rivera, how are you?" Adrian crossed the office and took the offered hand. "Mr. Keene." Davis's glance drifted toward the windows. "So, this is your office. Not a bad view." Adrian gestured toward the chairs. "It serves its purpose." Once they were seated, Davis settled an arm along the back of the chair. "I was pleased to hear you'd reconsidered my proposal. May I ask what changed your mind?" Adrian held his gaze. "Your fiancée gave me a reason to take another look." Something flickered behind Davis's eyes, sharp and quick. He kept his tone smooth. "Celia, she told me about your family's 200-year history in New Orleans, your accomplishments. The doors of the Keene name still opens in this city." Satisfaction flashed across Davis's face before he hid it behind a modest smile. He leaned back. "I'm a fortunate man. She's very devoted to me. I have to admit, I'm flattered." Adrian held his gaze. "Yes, you're fortunate. She's a strong, intelligent woman." Davis looked toward the desk first. "I believe working together on the port project would benefit us both. What do you need from me?" $5 million transferred into the partnership account. Davis's brows climbed. He recovered before the surprise could settle. "That's a substantial amount of cash. I could put up land as security." A single shake of Adrian's head closed the door on it. "Cash only." Davis studied him across the desk. Why? Rivera Group brings the capital and the port connections. Adrian's voice stayed even. Before I put my money into a partnership, I need to know the other man can put up his share. A thin line formed between Davis's brows. His fingers tapped once against the armrest. How much time do I have? Until 7 tonight. Davis gave a short, humorless laugh. Who keeps $5 million sitting in an account? That doesn't give me much time. Adrian's expression didn't move. Then don't waste it. He rose, and the motion made it plain the meeting was over. Davis stayed seated a moment longer, his eyes on Adrian, then got to his feet. And the agreement? Have the money ready. My attorneys will draw up the documents within the hour. We'll sign here, and you'll make the transfer. Davis weighed it, then nodded. All right. He put out his hand. That was a short meeting. Adrian took it once and let go. My time is valuable. I'll be in touch. Davis left, and the door fell shut behind him. Marcel waited until the room was theirs again. He can't move $5 million by 7, not from anything openly tied to him. Adrian turned back to the windows, the city bright and indifferent below. Marcel looked toward the closed door. You're forcing him to pull the money from St. Charles Holdings. Adrian stayed at the glass. And when he does, we follow it. Marcel was quiet a moment. You want proof Keene is the man behind the company. Adrian turned from the glass. Yes. Then we trace every deal tied to it, especially anything involving the Ward family. Marcel closed the folder slowly. You think Keene had a hand in their collapse? The answer came low and certain. That's what I intend to find out. By morning, Celia was pacing from one end of the room to the other. She pounded on the door with the side of her fist. Mom, Marie, open this door! Footsteps sounded down the hall, and Marie answered from the other side. Miss Celia, Mr. Keene has the key. He took the spare from the drawer too. Celia pressed her lips together. Get word to my mother, Marie. She'll find a way. A while later, a knock sounded at the door, and Margie spoke through it. Sweetheart, why is this door locked? Heat rose in Celia's chest. Because, Mom, the controlling lunatic whose house we're living in locked me in here. Do something. Open the door. I want to see Elise. Then Margie's answer dropped lower. All right. Give me a moment. Metal scraped inside the lock. A few minutes later, the door swung open. Margie stood in the hall with a bobby pin bent between her fingers. Celia rushed down the hall to Elise's room. Her daughter sat on the floor in the middle of her toys, and Celia dropped to her knees and pulled her in, holding on tight. Margie lingered in the doorway. What happened? Did the two of you fight? Did you do something to set Davis off? Celia rose and turned to face her, her voice low and controlled. Mom, I'm telling you for the last time, I will not sacrifice my daughter and myself so the rest of you can keep living comfortably. Davis Keene is a sick man, and I am not marrying him. Margie narrowed her eyes and shook her head slowly. You were always the difficult one, Celia, and you never think. You could wrap that man around your finger if you wanted to, but you'll let your pride bury you. The Ward women, a voice carried from behind them. You really do know how to wrap a man around your finger. Davis crossed to Celia with an easy smile and pressed a kiss to her cheek. Good morning, my love. You look especially beautiful this morning. The kiss left a cold trail across her cheek, and every muscle in her body tightened. She held herself rigid and let none of it show, then turned on him. You locked me in a room, Davis. Davis took the accusation without a flicker of guilt. I did. I was angry last night, jealous too. His tone stayed light, as though they were discussing the weather. The hotel has cameras, Celia. I saw the footage of you leaving with Adrian Rivera. Celia went still. He had seen. Davis smoothed a strand of hair back from her cheek. But this morning, my love, I learned why. You went to discuss the partnership. His smile widened. That was very thoughtful of you. It reminded me how well suited we are. Celia stared at him as the truth of it settled over her. Adrian had covered for her. Margie spread her hands, delighted by the whole picture. There. You really are perfect together. Celia shot her mother a hard look. Davis's smile thinned. Even so, I don't much care for the man. I didn't care for the way he looked at you. He turned to Margie, the warmth sliding back into his voice. I have a surprise for you. The wedding is still 2 weeks away, but I think we should make it legal here at the house on Thursday. Celia's head snapped toward him. Davis, what do you mean, Thursday? That's 3 days from now. His hand settled at her waist. Just the family, Celia, don't worry. I've already ordered you a wonderful dress. The big wedding can still go ahead as planned. Celia's fists closed at her sides. She had to do something. Her mother, her brother, the comfortable life they were so determined to keep, and none of it mattered now. She had to get Elise out of this house, out of this city. Across the city, in the Rivera building, Marcel crossed to Adrian with a small plastic bag and held it up. Sealed inside was a toothbrush. Adrian nodded slowly, his eyes settling on the bag. The nanny, Marie, was it? Did you pay her? We did. Handed it over in person. Marcel held it up to the light. Honestly, she'd have given it to us for free. It was obvious she couldn't stand Davis Keene. Adrian took it and looked closer. The toothbrush was small and pink, made for a child. His thumb brushed the edge of the bag before he handed it back to Marcel. Get me the results as fast as possible. His eyes stayed on Marcel. And Cedric Ward. Is he being watched? 2 days now, around the clock. Adrian turned to the windows, his gaze settling in the direction of the lake. Celia, whatever he's holding over you, I'll find it. At the Keene estate, Celia was packing whatever she could fit into a backpack. Margie stood over her, arms crossed. You're not thinking straight, Celia. Where would you even go? Celia looked up at her, the half-packed backpack still in her hands. Mum, I'll rent a small apartment with my daughter. I'll manage on my salary. And what about us? Celia steadied herself before she answered. You can come with me, Mum. Cedric can find steady work, and I'll take care of you. You could sell a few pieces of jewellery. That would buy us a car and cover 6 months' rent on a bigger place. There are things we can do. Margie shook her head, her mouth pressing thin. You can't live that way, Celia. You can't. Heat flared up through her before she could hold it back. No, Mum, you can't live that way, and I'm not you. You were the same way with Dad. She dropped the bag at her feet and turned to face her mother. 5 years ago, Mum. The message sent to Jonah Reed from my phone. Did you know about it? Margie's expression changed. What message? The one that made him leave me. Margie lifted one shoulder. Your father didn't approve of that relationship, but I don't know anything about a message. A bitter laugh escaped her. My daughter has grown up without her father, because of you. This obsession with money and the family name. Look what it did to me. Look what it did to all of us. Her voice cracked. You and Dad took the man I loved away from me. Why bring this up now? Margie's chin came up. If he were any kind of man, he'd have come back and found you. We did what we believed was right for you. Something hardened in Celia. The right thing? Living with a lunatic like Davis Keene is the right thing? She snatched the bag off the floor and hurried into the next room, lifting Elise into her arms. Margie came after her into the hall. Celia, stop, you can't leave. What happens to Cedric? If you won't think of me, think of him. Celia didn't slow down. She carried Elise through the front door and toward the gates where a few of Keene's men stood guard. Miss Ward, Mr. Keene gave strict orders not to let you leave. Please go back inside. Celia stopped, tightening her hold on Elise. What is this supposed to mean? Open these gates. One of the men didn't move. We can't open the gates. Celia turned and hurried to the back terrace, only to find the boat gone from the dock. She looked at the high walls ringing the grounds, at the long drop to the water, and thought of Elise in her arms. There was no way over. Tears running down her face, she went back inside. Margie waited at the door, her face drawn with sorrow. Her voice was barely above a whisper. There's nothing we can do, sweetheart. Our life is here now. You'll get used to it. Marie was hurrying toward them with Elise gathered against her chest, the little girl's face pale and frightened. Miss Celia, let me make you some coffee. Elise is frightened. I'll keep her with me a while. She held out her own phone, and Davis's face filled the screen. Celia took it with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Davis's voice came warm and easy through the speaker. Sweetheart, it's only a few days. I don't want you leaving the house. Her fingers closed hard around the phone. You can't keep me here, Davis. The warmth went out of him. Listen to me. Cedric is being beaten by 3 men right now. He's gambling again. He sounded almost sorry. He can never cover what he owes. Sometimes a man has to learn his lesson. He lifted his wrist into view and checked his watch. I'll get to him in 15 minutes or so and pull him out the way I always do. Celia bit down on her lip until it hurt. Beside her, Margie pressed a hand to her mouth. Oh my God! On the screen, his expression softened into something tender. Don't worry, my love. I'd never let anything happen to Cedric. He's your brother after all. And we're a family, aren't we? Celia's jaw set. I hate you, Davis. He gave her a wounded look. But I love you, and I've arranged a little something to make you more cooperative on our wedding day. Don't be mad at me. Celia's chest tightened. She gripped the phone harder and waited for the rest. His tone remained casual. Elise will be staying with Marie until the wedding, at Marie's house. Celia's head snapped up. The spot where Marie had stood was empty. Elise! The name tore out of her as she ran for the front door. Beyond the iron gates, a car was already pulling away. Marie was there through the rear window, Elise's small head beside her. Her whole body went cold. No, Davis. No, you can't take Elise from me. His voice trailed after her, unbothered. She'll have a wonderful 3 days with Marie's cousins. She trusts Marie, and you'll get some time to yourself. Try to see it that way. Celia drew back her arm and hurled the phone. It hit the wall and shattered. Her breath broke as she sank to the floor. Her voice came low and ragged. I'll make you pay for this, Davis Keene. Margie lowered herself down beside her and stroked her hair. In the back seat of the car, Marcel rested a hand on Cedric's shoulder. Blood was drying beneath the younger man's nose and along his split lip. If I hadn't shown up, those men would have put you in the hospital. Cedric took the handkerchief Marcel held out and pressed it under his nose. Thanks. But who are you? Marcel offered his hand. Marcel Richards. I'm an executive with the Rivera Group. Cedric studied him through one swelling eye. The Rivera Group, as in Adrian Rivera? The man everybody's been talking about? A smile touched Marcel's mouth. The very same. The car slowed at the iron gates, and Cedric sat forward, staring at the grounds beyond them. Marcel watched the gates swing open. Mr. Rivera wanted to meet you himself, Mr. Ward. Unease pulled at Cedric, and he turned in his seat. Marcel went on before he could speak, his voice easy. No need to worry. Mr. Rivera is an old friend of your sister Celia, and he wants to help you. Cedric turned that over for a moment, then gave a slow nod. When they stepped out of the car, Adrian was standing at the front door of the house. Cedric started toward him, and Adrian took in the damage to his face, then looked at Marcel. What happened? Marcel's jaw tightened. 3 men were working him over outside the casino. Cedric came closer, his gaze working over Adrian's features. Hey, have we met before? You look familiar. Adrian held out his hand. I'm Adrian Rivera. You knew me as Jonah Reed, Cedric. We crossed paths a few times. Cedric's throat worked around the name. You! The word came out rough. How is that even possible? Adrian stepped back from the door. There's a lot we need to talk about. Come inside. At the Keene mansion, Celia was sweeping everything off the sideboard, sending it down in a crash of glass and silver. Margie trailed after her with her hands raised. Don't, Celia. Be reasonable. Celia rounded on her. You've spent your whole life making excuses for the men who control you. You let Dad make every decision, and now you're doing the same thing with Davis. Margie's voice came out thin and shaking. I don't know how to live any other way. I know, Celia held her mother's gaze. And that's why I won't let Elise grow up watching me turn into you. Celia looked around the wrecked room. Where's my bag? My phone? Margie's face fell. Sweetheart, Marie took your bag and my phone when she left. Celia's palm came down hard on the table. I trusted Marie. Why didn't you stop her, Mom? Why? Tears were running down Margie's cheeks now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. But if we just go along with it, everything will be all right." "Oh, Mom." Celia pulled her blouse up over her head and dropped it, then reached for the button of her slacks. Margie's hands fluttered between them. "What are you doing, Celia?" Celia was already moving toward the terrace doors. "I'm going to swim. To the other side." Margie went after her, her voice climbing. "Celia, no, it's almost dark. That lake opens into the river. There are alligators out there. Celia!" On the terrace above the lake, Adrian sat across from Cedric while the water went dark behind them, and Marcel took the seat at his other side. Cedric shifted in his chair, his eyes moving from Adrian to Marcel and back. "What is it you want from me?" Adrian leaned in. "How much do you owe, Cedric?" A muscle ticked in Cedric's jaw before he gave the number. "Around 700,000, last I counted." Adrian gave a slow nod. "And who do you owe it to?" Cedric's hand closed on the arm of the chair. "You already know where I play." "Black River." Adrian's gaze stayed level. "Who owns Black River?" Cedric lifted a shoulder, as though the answer hardly mattered. "St. Charles Group. They run a few other casinos in town too, don't they?" A faint smile touched Adrian's mouth. "They do?" He laid a few papers and photographs on the table between them. In the top photograph, Davis Keene was leaving the casino's private upper floor. Cedric looked up, something uncertain crossing his face. "Davis has been keeping the casino off my back for a while now." Adrian shook his head once. "Davis isn't covering your debts, Cedric. He's collecting them." Cedric only stared at him. "Davis Keene owns St. Charles Group. He's the man you owe." Adrian held Cedric's eyes. "The men who worked you over tonight answer to him. The debt belongs to him, and he's using it to keep your family trapped in that house." Cedric bent forward, his elbows on his knees, and covered his face. Adrian lowered his voice. "Now you're going to help me get Celia out of that house, and the rest of your family with her." Davis's car had just swung through the gates, headlights sweeping the lawn, when Celia pulled in a deep breath, and with her mother's screams still ringing behind her, she let herself drop into the dark water. Two of the guards went in after her. They fought through the dark water and the wild swing of her arms until they caught hold of her. Davis came running out onto the terrace. "I've got her!" He tore off his jacket and threw himself in after them, then hauled Celia up against him and dragged her to the dock. His arms closed around her, and her skin crawled where his soaked shirt pressed against her. He held her face between his hands. "Celia, have you lost your mind? Do you want to die?" Her lips trembled. "Bring my daughter back." The plea was barely audible. "You can't take her from me." Davis gathered her in. "She's my daughter too, Celia. I would never hurt her. The wedding is happening Thursday, and after that, Elise comes home. Until then, I have to make sure you don't try this again." She twisted against his hold. "Let go of me." He lifted her off her feet and carried her inside, up the stairs, into her room. "This is for your own good." He set her down, walked out, and locked the door behind him. Through the door, Celia heard him tell Margie, "She doesn't leave this room." Celia lay across her bed and let the tears come. Somewhere between exhaustion and grief, her mind slipped back 5 years. To Jonah, to the way he had held her face and looked into her eyes before he told her he loved her. The words warm against her mouth a moment before he kissed her slow and deep, like he had all the time in the world and meant to spend every minute of it on her. To the night after the shower, when he had stood behind her and worked a comb through her wet hair, patient with every tangle, then set it down to press his mouth to the back of her neck, lower along the slope of her shoulder, down the curve of her spine, until her breath went thin and she lost the line between his skin and her own. The heat of his hands, the scent of him, she kept all of it close, and it carried her down into sleep. Cedric's voice pulled her out of sleep. He was sitting on the edge of her bed with a finger pressed to his lips. Celia came up on one elbow. "Cedric, how did you get in here?" Cedric kept it low. "I told Davis I'd talk some sense into you." He leaned close to her ear. "Hold on, Celia. Adrian's getting you out." She stared at him, unable to make sense of what she'd heard. He spoke so quietly, she barely heard him. The casino I owe all that money to? Davis is the man behind it. Her hand came up over her mouth. Cedric pressed a kiss to her cheek. Just go along with it. He's coming for you. Celia caught her brother's hand before he could pull away. Cedric, can I even trust you? A bitter smile crossed his face. I owe you. I owe Elise. I wrecked your life, Celia. He met her eyes. Let me put it right. Her fingers tightened around his. Then tell Adrian the wedding is Thursday. Her voice broke. And tell him Davis took our daughter. The next morning, Adrian stood at his office window, watching the river and checking his watch. Celia, where are you? You haven't shown up for work in days. The door opened, and Marcel came in with a sealed envelope in his hand. The results here. Adrian took it and turned it over without opening it. Marcel watched him. It might not be yours, Adrian. What happens then? A faint smile touched Adrian's mouth. Nothing changes. I want Celia back either way. I have to get her away from that man. He slid a thumb under the flap. I already know she's mine, Marcel. He drew out the page and read it. A daughter. His daughter with Celia. 4 years in the world without him, and he had not been there for a single one of them. His jaw locked down over everything rising in his chest. He set the page on the desk and walked out before Marcel could get a word in. Marcel crossed to the desk and looked down at the page. 99.9% probability of paternity. The corner of his mouth lifted, his phone buzzed in his pocket, and he brought it to his ear. Marie? Is something wrong? Whatever Marie told him next pulled the color from his face. He was already moving, out the door and down the hall in the direction Adrian had gone. Adrian stood in the corridor with his own phone against his ear. The two of them caught sight of each other at the same moment. Marcel reached him first. Adrian, Davis took Elise away from Celia. Marie has her. Adrian gave a short nod, his expression hardening. I know. Cedric just called. Davis has Celia locked in a room. The wedding's tomorrow. Marcel's hand tightened around his phone. What do we do? Adrian didn't hesitate. We speed everything up. Just then, at the far end of the corridor, Davis Keene came strolling toward them. Mr. Rivera, good morning. The greeting rang out bright and easy. Adrian's jaw flexed. Mr. Keene, I wasn't aware we had an appointment. Davis came through the door with his smile already in place. I assumed a man could drop by his partner's office without an appointment. Adrian let the door fall shut behind them, and the noise of the floor outside cut off with it. We're not partners yet, Mr. Keene. The deadline I gave you, 7 o'clock last night, came and went. Without waiting for the offer, Davis lowered himself into the chair across the desk and spread his hands. I'm sorry about that. Something happened at home. Under the edge of the desk, out of sight, Adrian's fist closed slowly. He kept it there, kept all of it off his face, and watched the other man settle in like he owned the room. Davis pressed on. But I have the money. Wired it to your account on my way over. A thin smile touched Adrian's mouth. You want this partnership, don't you, Davis? Davis gave a dry laugh. I'm glad we're past the formalities. You may be new to New Orleans, but I know how much weight the Rivera name carries across Louisiana and Mississippi. Why shouldn't we grow together? Adrian inclined his head and reached for the phone. Suzanne, bring in the contract and have legal come up. He set the phone down, and the office went still. Beyond the glass, the river lay brown and slow under the morning, and Adrian let the quiet stretch. Then he chose to. How is Miss Ward? Oh, she's wonderful. Davis's smile warmed. Up to her elbows in wedding plans. Adrian watched his face. I hear she has a daughter. Something moved behind Davis's eyes, though he kept smiling. Our daughter. Yes. The claim landed somewhere under Adrian's ribs and went nowhere on his face. A family man. That's no small thing. I'd imagine they're the most precious people in your life. Davis settled deeper into the chair, comfortable in the lie. I've known Celia since she was a girl. She knows where she belongs. She has always belonged to me. For a moment, Adrian let that sit between them. Then he found Davis's eyes and held them. Belonging with someone and belonging to them are two very different things. Let's hope she feels the same. The door opened, and Suzanne set the contract on the desk and withdrew, while the company lawyer stayed beside Davis's chair. Adrian drew the pages toward him, took his time, then checked the transfer confirmation on the monitor beside him. He set the pen down instead of signing. The money came from St. Charles Group, not from Keen Industries. Davis waved it away. St. Charles is one of my investment vehicles. Adrian slid a single page across the desk and left his fingers on it a moment longer than he needed to. Then sign this. It states that St. Charles is under your control, that you authorize the transfer, and that you have legal authority over the funds. Davis's gaze dropped to the page, then lifted again. You already have the money. Adrian kept his tone level. I don't take $5 million from a company whose owner won't put his name beside it. You missed the deadline. The original terms aren't enough anymore. The pen lay between them, and Davis made no move toward it. Neither did Adrian. He let the offer hang there and waited him out. Then he made it plain. Sign it, or the money goes back and the deal dies. For a moment, the ease drained out of Davis's face. He glanced at the lawyer, then at Adrian, and his mouth tightened before he took up the pen and signed. Adrian wasn't finished. My legal team will also need St. Charles's current holdings schedule before I sign. Every company it controls. Davis's jaw tightened. That has nothing to do with our partnership. Everything connected to the money has something to do with our partnership. Adrian gave no ground. Davis weighed it, then dipped his chin. You'll have it within the hour. Adrian squared the signed authorization and slid it into the folder. My legal team will go through all of it. You'll have my signature when they're satisfied. Davis leaned forward in the chair. You gave me a deadline. Adrian met him without heat. And you missed it. Davis held his gaze for another moment. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and saw himself out, and the door closed behind him, leaving the office quiet again. Once Davis was gone, Marcel came in from the side room. His office is sending the holding schedule. Adrian lifted the signed page off the desk and turned it to the light. Now we follow the money. Now we follow. Celia was standing at the window when the sun began to sink behind the lake, turning the water copper and violet. She had spent years studying. She had become a doctor and built a career of her own. She had earned the respect of people who trusted her with their lives, and somehow she had ended up locked inside a bedroom, waiting to be forced into a marriage she did not want. Where had she gone wrong? She had tried not to be selfish. She had supported her mother, protected Cedric, and held the family together long after it had started falling apart. Was this what it had cost her? Celia pressed her fingertips to the cool glass. She could not change her mother. She could not make Cedric's choices for him. They would have to live with the choices they had made, but she would not let their choices become Elise's fate. Tomorrow, Davis intended to make her his wife. Once they were legally married, escaping him would become harder. Getting Elise away from him might become harder still. Her breath fogged the glass, and for one moment the fear she had kept buried rose into her throat. She let herself feel it. Then she drew another breath and spoke to the darkening lake. Adrian, please come before it's too late. A key turned in the lock. Celia straightened as the door opened and Margie came in carrying a dinner tray. Her mother closed the door behind her and held the tray against her chest. I brought your dinner, sweetheart. Margie crossed to the table and set it down. But please don't try to leave again. You frightened all of us. Fighting him only makes things worse. Celia sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her mother. I don't know where Marie lives. She has my daughter, and I have no phone, no bag, and no way through those gates. Her hands tightened in her lap. Where exactly do you think I'm going to go? Margie lowered herself beside her and took her hand. Sometimes people don't know what's best for them. Under the circumstances, this is the safest choice. Celia looked down at their joined hands and gave a soft, humorless laugh. No, Mom. Everything has changed. Margie's fingers tightened around hers. Celia met her eyes. Elise's father has come back. Her mother stared at her. What do you mean, he's come back? Celia held her gaze. Jonah. For a moment, Margie did not move. Celia watched recognition spread across her mother's face, followed by the color draining from it. Celia's tone stayed even. Jonah Reed is Adrian Rivera. Margie pulled her hand away. Adrian Rivera? Celia nodded once. Yes, but that changes nothing. Margie was already shaking her head. He disappeared for 5 years. He left you alone when you needed him, and compared to Davis, he was nobody. Celia didn't look away. He didn't know. Margie fell silent. He didn't know about Elise. He didn't know what Dad did to us. Celia's voice stayed low. And if you tell Davis who Adrian is to me, you will lose me completely. Do you understand? Margie's lips parted, but no answer came. He'll come get us. Celia rose from the bed. I knew him before the Rivera name, before the money, before anyone in this city was afraid of him. I knew his heart, Mum. He won't leave us with Davis. Margie tilted her head, pity softening her face while fear settled in behind it. Oh, sweetheart, you were always such a romantic. Her mother's voice gentled, wrapping the warning in love. That was what made it hurt. So, your Jonah became rich and powerful. Margie smoothed a crease from her skirt. Men change when they discover what power can buy. They stop being satisfied with what they have. They start believing they can have anything they want. Celia had watched her mother surrender like this her whole life, and it still hurt to see it. If he truly wanted you, he wouldn't have stayed away this long. Margie studied her face. And now that he has money and power, he could have any woman he wanted. Don't pin your hopes on a man like that. The words touched the deepest wound in her, the one that had never fully healed. He had left once. The old fear came back that she was easy to leave. Then she remembered why he'd gone and who had sent him. Celia pulled her hand free. That's your problem, Mum. Margie's expression tightened. Celia held her mother's gaze. You make yourself smaller and the men around you bigger. You let them decide what you're worth because you never learned to see your own worth. Margie looked away. Celia went on. You spent your whole life believing the strongest man in the room must also be the safest. You gave them your voice, your choices, everything that made you who you were, and you called it security. Margie's chin came up. I did what I had to do for this family. Celia didn't raise her voice. No, you did what fear taught you to do. Margie's eyes filled, and Celia fought the urge to cross the room and hold her. She held still. For a second her own certainty wavered. Her daughter was somewhere across the city, beyond her reach, and tomorrow was almost here. The fear was still there, but she refused to let it choose for her. You don't know your own worth, Mum, but I know mine. She didn't flinch. No man owns me. No man gets to tell me where to live or who to love, and Elise will never grow up believing she has to settle for a life she doesn't want. Margie's mouth trembled. I'm not waiting for Adrian to give me a life. Celia's voice dropped. I trust him to help me get my life back. I would rather lose everything than teach Elise that love means surrender. Neither of them spoke. Margie rose and straightened the front of her dress. By the time she reached the door, the familiar resignation had returned to her face. Eat your dinner, sweetheart. Tomorrow Elise will come home. Her hand closed around the knob. And I'll still be here. I'll always be here. The lock turned after she left. Celia stayed beside the bed, listening to her mother's footsteps fade down the hall. Then she wiped the tears from her face and turned back towards the dark lake. I knew you when you had nothing, she whispered. That's why I know who you are now. Celia was standing in front of the mirror in the lace wedding gown Davis had chosen for her, the long train pooling on the floor. Even if she had wanted to get married today, she would never have picked this dress. The man had no taste at all. The door opened and Margie came in, Cedric trailing a step after her. Her mother pressed both hands to her chest. Oh, sweetheart, you look incredible. Cedric let out a dry laugh. Celia turned from the glass. Mum, you can't be serious. She lowered her voice, speaking quickly. Have you heard anything about Elise? Did you call Marie? Please, just call her so I can hear her voice. Margie's smile faltered. Davis won't let anyone call Marie. Cedric caught her eye from across the room and made a small motion with his hand. Easy. Stay calm. Margie turned as one of the housekeepers called her name from the hall, then stepped out. The moment she was gone, Cedric crossed to Celia and bent close. Elise is fine. Marie knows what's going on. Just hold on. Celia kept her voice low. Cedric, I'm supposed to marry this man in less than 30 minutes. How am I supposed to stay calm? The door opened again, and the air in the room changed before she even turned. Davis filled the doorway in a black tuxedo, and his eyes moved over her the way a man looks at something he already believes is his. Every part of her wanted to shield herself from that look. My God, Celia, you're beautiful. He came closer, and she forced herself to stay where she was. My bride, you know how long I've waited for this. Cedric shot him a dark look on his way out, and the door closed behind the only ally she had. Margie reappeared in the doorway, one finger raised. Oh, Davis, it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony. Davis didn't take his eyes off Celia. I don't believe in that kind of thing, Margie. Our fate was decided years ago. He stepped in behind her, and she watched his hand settle on the curve of her waist in the mirror, the diamonds cold at her throat, the lace closing her in. In a few minutes, you'll be my wife. Her skin crawled where he had touched her, even after she slipped out from under his hand and faced her mother. Well, Mum, let's hope the bad luck gets here fast. Davis laughed, pleased with himself, as if she'd paid him a compliment. We'll be waiting downstairs, my love. The officiant will be here any minute. His gaze slid over the gown one more time. Don't keep me waiting. He left, Margie following him, and the door closed, leaving Celia alone with a wedding she could no longer stop. Celia turned back to the mirror. The woman looking back at her stood straight, the diamonds cold at her throat, wrapped in lace she would never have chosen. If this is what it takes to get Elise back, I'll do it, she told the woman in the glass. Her chin came up. But you haven't won, Davis Keene. Celia was halfway down the staircase when the table set for the ceremony came into view. White flowers covered one end of it, and the documents waited beneath the light from the tall windows, two black pens laid neatly beside them. The officiant stood behind the table while Davis spoke to him in a low, easy voice, relaxed and smiling, as though the morning had already gone exactly the way he intended. Margie and Cedric were waiting at the foot of the stairs. Celia kept descending one slow step after another, the lace train whispering behind her, and with every step the front doors stayed closed. Cedric offered his arm when she reached him. She took it, but her eyes stayed on the entrance. He's not coming. He told me he had a plan. Cedric covered her hand with his. There was no time left for a plan. Davis was already watching her cross the room, his smile widening with every step she took toward him, and when she reached the table he came forward and took her hands in both of his. Celia leaned close enough that only he could hear her. Where is Elise? His eyes stayed on the room, his thumb moving over her knuckles, gentle enough for anyone watching. The warning was in the pressure beneath it. After the ceremony, sweetheart. The officiant opened his folder and began the ceremony. When he turned to Celia, her lips parted, but no answer came. Davis watched her struggle for a moment, then looked back at the officiant, his smile fixed in place. Ask me first. That'll give my bride another minute to think about what matters most. Elise. Celia heard the name buried inside the threat as clearly as if he had spoken it aloud. The officiant asked Davis the question, and he answered without hesitation. I do. He signed his name in a single stroke and set the pen beside the empty line, waiting for her signature. Then everyone looked at Celia. Her mother stood a few feet away, hands clasped tight at her waist, and Cedric's face had gone rigid beside her. Davis stayed close enough that she could feel the heat of him. The officiant repeated the question. Celia stared at the blank line. If she refused, Davis still had Elise. If she signed, he would only grow harder to escape with every hour that passed. Her lips parted again. At that moment, the front doors opened. The sound rolled through the great room and brought everything to a stop. Adrian Rivera stood in the doorway with Elise in his arms, and Marcel came in behind him, two men following to take their places near the doors, quiet and watchful, men who had clearly come prepared for trouble. Adrian's gaze found Celia across the room, and for one suspended second, neither of them moved. Then Elise saw her. "Mummy!" Celia tore her hands from Davis and turned. "Elise!" Davis caught her wrist before she could take more than a single step. The warmth left Adrian's face. He crossed the floor with Elise held securely against him, each step measured. The anger in him carried so quietly that the whole room seemed to feel it, and he stopped a few feet away with his eyes dropping once to the hand around Celia's wrist before lifting back to Davis's face. "Let go of her arm." He held the other man's gaze without blinking. "She's not yours to keep, Keen. Elise is my daughter." Margie pressed a hand to her mouth. Something in Adrian's tone loosened Davis's grip, and he let Celia go as though the choice had been his own. Adrian crouched and set Elise down. "Go to your mother, sweetheart." Elise ran, and Celia dropped to her knees and caught her, burying her face in the dark curls she had been afraid she might never touch again. Her hands moved over Elise's back and shoulders and cheeks, making sure she was real and whole and unharmed. "I missed you, Mummy." The words came small against her shoulder. "I missed you too, baby." Celia kissed her again and again, and when she finally looked up, Adrian was still watching them both. "Neither of them was ever your family." His attention came back to Celia. "You don't have to do this anymore." But Celia was already rising, Elise's hand locked tight in hers, the decision settled the moment her daughter had run into her arms. She looked straight at the officiant, and her voice didn't waver. "No, I won't be signing anything. I do not consent to this marriage." Davis turned on her, the polished expression he had worn all morning gone now, and Celia drew Elise closer to her side and met it without flinching. "There's nothing left for you to threaten me with." The front doors opened again. 3 detectives came through them, 2 uniformed officers at their backs, and the warrant in the lead man's hand stopped Davis where he stood. The detective's voice cut across the room. "Davis Keen." His head came around, sharp and fast. The detective crossed to the table without hurrying. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges including unlawful imprisonment, coercion, conspiracy, and financial fraud." Davis spread his hands and looked around the room as if he were the only reasonable man left in it. "This is my home. Celia is my fiancée. Her family has lived here for a year." Marcel laid a folder over the unsigned certificate, and the detective opened it. Inside were the transfer records from St. Charles Group, the authorization carrying Davis's signature, and the documents tying its companies to the ward debt. Adrian stood beside Celia now, close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him without being touched. "Your signature tied you to St. Charles." His tone stayed even. "The money led to Black River, to Cedric's debt, and to the company that bought the ward loans. You destroyed her family, and then you brought them into this house and made them believe they owed you for saving them." Davis's eyes hardened, but it was Margie who broke the quiet. She looked at her son. "Is that true?" Cedric's shame showed in the way his shoulders dropped, though he held her eyes when he answered. "All of it, Mum." The detective stepped toward Davis, and the last of the ease drained out of his face. "Call the mayor. Call the governor." The words climbed out of him. "This is a setup, and you're taking the word of a man who's been in this city for 4 months. We have the records, Mr. Keen." The detective held the warrant at his side. "Step away from Miss Ward." Davis moved without warning. He caught Celia around the waist and hauled her back against him, and his other hand slid beneath his tuxedo jacket and came out holding a gun. Elise screamed. Cedric pulled her back before she could reach for her mother, and Margie gathered the little girl against her as the officers drew their weapons. The barrel pressed into Celia's side. The room went still. Adrian was only a few steps away, his hands closed into fists, his face cold and controlled. "Put the gun down," the detective ordered. Davis tightened his arm around her. "Back away, all of you." She could feel the hard rise and fall of his breathing against her back, his control gone now, stripped down to the panic he had hidden under it all along. Adrian's eyes settled on the weapon, then on Davis. His voice scraped out behind her. "I'll kill her!" "No, you won't." Adrian took one slow step forward, the gun pushed harder into her ribs. "Don't come any closer." "Stay where you are," the detective warned, but Adrian kept moving, his eyes never leaving the other man. "You don't love her enough to die for her, Keen." The words came low and even. "You only love owning her." The metal stayed cold against her side. Celia held still and watched him come, close enough now that she could see what he was doing, drawing Davis's aim away from her and onto himself. Rage broke across Davis's face, and the barrel left her and swung toward Adrian. That was all she needed. She dropped her weight and twisted out from under his arm. In the same instant, Adrian struck his wrist, and the gun hit the floor and skidded beneath the table. Adrian drove him backward into the edge of it. The flowers shook, the pens rolled, and the unsigned certificate slid beneath Marcel's folder as his fist caught Davis across the jaw and sent him sprawling over the table. "That was for my daughter." Davis tried to push himself up. Adrian caught the front of his tuxedo, hauled him upright, and hit him again. "And that was for Celia." The detectives reached them before he could do more. They pulled Davis off the table, forced his arms behind him, and the cuffs closed around his wrists. Blood darkened the corner of his mouth, and for the first time there was nothing polished left in him. He looked past the officers to Celia. "You and your family will come crawling back the moment you understand what you've lost." Celia stood, with Elise pressed to her side, and Adrian beside them. "No, Davis, you only made us believe we had nowhere else to go." The officers led him toward the doors, and his gaze stayed fixed on Adrian until the bright morning swallowed him from view. The great room went quiet. White flowers still covered one end of the table, and Davis's signature sat on the document, bold and useless beneath the folder that had undone him. While an officer crouched to bag the gun where it had skidded, Celia turned to Adrian. He waited, and he didn't reach for her, so she took Elise's hand and crossed the small distance between them herself. For the first time in 5 years, nothing stood in her way. A full year later. By the following June, the last of the preparations were complete, and the first guests were arriving at the house on Lake Pontchartrain. The garden along the water was dressed all in white. Roses banked thick at the end of every row of chairs and climbed into an arch at the head of the aisle. Out past the lawn, the lake held the last of the sun, smooth and bright as glass. Upstairs in the bedroom, Celia stood in front of the mirror in the gown she had spent months searching for and had chosen for herself. The woman looking back at her was smiling. Her friends moved around her in a happy rush, one of them pouring champagne, another tucking a loose strand of hair back into place. Elise darted through the room in a small white dress, weaving between them. Margie leaned against the wall with her arms folded and watched her daughter the way a woman watches something she once thought she'd lost. Margie's voice gentled. "You chose this one yourself." Celia met her eyes in the glass, every part of it. A knock came at the door, and it opened a crack before she could answer. Adrian's voice reached her through the gap, low and warm. "Ready, my love?" Celia spun toward the sound, and the women laughed as she caught the edge of it before it could open another inch. She and Margie traded a look, both of them grinning. "Don't you dare come in. It's bad luck to see the bride." From the other side, the amusement carried through in Adrian's answer. "I've waited 5 years. I can wait 10 more minutes." The door clicked shut. Out in the hall, Adrian straightened his cuff. Marcel and Cedric stood waiting, both of them watching him fight a smile and lose. Marcel shook his head at him. "I've never seen a groom this nervous. Didn't think a man as cool as you had it in him." Adrian gave the cuff one last tug. "You've never seen me marry Celia." Cedric's phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it and slid it into his pocket. Adrian caught the move. "Cedric, even on a day like this, your head's at work." Cedric gave a small shrug. "Closing day. Biggest sale I've ever run." Then he smiled and let it go. "But today it can wait." Marcel grinned at him. "You happy in the new place, Cedric?" Cedric tipped his head. "Easy now. Close to the office, and we love it. Only thing is, Mom keeps wanting a lake nearby, so every now and then I just bring her out here to you." Marcel turned back to Adrian. "Speaking of which, I heard Celia got the promotion. Congratulations." Adrian's whole face changed when he answered. "She did. She was made assistant medical director of the emergency department last month. Adrian and Marcel walked down together and out into the garden. The people who ran this city stood among the roses, some with cocktails in hand, some already seated in the rows of chairs. Marcel checked his watch and clapped Adrian once on the shoulder. "Time to take your place. She'll be down any minute." This time, Celia came down the stairs holding Elise's hand, the train of the gown she had chosen moving behind her. Cedric met her at the bottom and offered his arm. "Ready?" She looked past him to the arch where Adrian stood. "This time, I am." Cedric walked her up the long aisle, and her heart was beating fast by the time she reached the front. She took her place beside Adrian, and together they turned to face the officiant. He kept it short, a few warm words about love that lasts, about the long road that had finally brought them back to each other. Then he turned to Celia. "Celia Ward, do you take Adrian Rivera?" "I do." It came out of her before he could finish, steady and certain, and the guests laughed softly around them. Adrian's mouth curved. "You were supposed to let him finish." Her eyes held his. "I've waited long enough." The officiant turned to Adrian, the smile still on his face. "And do you, Adrian Rivera, take Celia Ward?" "I do." Adrian never looked away from her. He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger, his touch steady where hers trembled, and she did the same for him. The man between them closed his book. "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." He drew her in then, and he kissed her, like there was no door left between them, no name she had to hide, and no life waiting to take him away again. She came up for air and pressed her mouth to his ear. "Remember our deal. No more bullets, no more secrets, no more leaving me behind." His arm stayed around her, and he answered against her lips, low enough that it was only for her. "With you beside me, I already have everything I fought for." He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck, then drew back just far enough to hold her eyes. "And with you beside me, I have nothing left to prove." Then Elise tugged at her mother's skirts. Adrian bent and swept the girl up into his arms, and the three of them stood together, while the garden and the people in it fell away. "Thank you for staying with Celia and Adrian all the way to the end. It truly means the world to me. If their story touched your heart, a like helps more people find it, and a subscribe keeps you close for every story still to come. And I'd love to hear from you. We all have a story, don't we? Have you ever had a controlling, narcissistic partner like Davis, or someone your family didn't approve of the way they turned against Jonah? I'd really love to know your story, even just a few words. And as always, tell me where in the world you're listening from. Drop a little note in the comments. You have no idea how much it means to me.